All right, welcome to another episode of Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard live. I am the New York Daily News NFL columnist and Giants beat writer. Thrilled to be here with you guys to unpack the Giants 2024 NFL draft, to talk about the consequences, repercussions, upgrades, concerns still with the roster. Where do the Giants go from here? What are the biggest questions that you have as fans about your team? What do you love the most about this Giants draft? What are you most concerned about? What questions do you have for me? I hope I have information, as always, to bring to you guys to give you a new perspective and a fresh perspective and good context and full context on what I believe this Giants team has and what they still need. Remember to purchase a super chat or super sticker. You can have your comment or question elevated to the top of the chat and answered and addressed immediately. It's a great way to support the page. Make sure to subscribe to the page here, the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard YouTube page. Something else you should do if you're a subscriber, make sure you turn on your notifications. Turn on those notifications for the channel. Because if you turn on notifications, we know that you're setting up and telling yourself, okay, I'm carving out that 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday, Thursday live chat with Pat. But sometimes we forget we have busy lives. We have places to go, people to see. You'll get a notification right to the lock screen of your phone alerting you that the live chat is coming. Once I put it up there in the queue, you'll get a 30-minute basically warning and then a countdown up to the time that we go live. Thanks for being here. Before I get into your questions, and I see a couple super chats rolling in already, and I really do appreciate that as always. I wanted to take a minute to acknowledge Corey Cunningham, the former Giant and NFL offensive lineman who sadly and tragically passed away at age 28 last week. Corey was obviously a professional athlete, but more so than anything, Corey was a great person. Corey was a good friend and somebody whose absence is really hitting the Giants team and the NFL community in a hard way. I mean, we're talking about a young man who would let people stay with him when they got signed to the team and didn't have a place to stay, who would visit teammates' families and had their children calling him Uncle Corey. Just a fun-loving, enthusiastic person who always had a smile on his face and would give you the shirt off his back. And I can't claim to have an especially close relationship with Corey Cunningham, but what I can tell you is that he will be missed. I will miss him when he hasn't been in the Giants locker room recently, not being on the roster. He was missed there, I know. And I'll just say this. All I think about is him and Graham Gano, the Giants kicker. They would always play that game of trying to flip the water bottle and land it straight through into the tiny hole in the recycling can in the Giants locker room. And they would post those on Instagram, and he would be going back and forth with Hottie Ward or Graham or some other teammate. And last thing I'll say is this. In the NFL community, you go in these locker rooms, a lot of times offensive linemen sit with offensive linemen, defensive players sit with defensive players, quarterbacks with quarterbacks, etc. Corey is the kind of guy who, his best friends were all around the locker room. They were staff members of the team. They were defensive players, offensive players, special teamers. Everybody loved Corey. And this is shocking and something that I think is going to be on the minds and hearts of people in the Giants organization, on the Giants team, and anyone who has known Corey. He played for the Cardinals, Patriots, and Giants. And I just wanted to acknowledge him at the start of this because this is a really sad time in the Giants community. And even though we are sitting here talking about player contracts and draft picks and the fate of the franchise and people's jobs and quarterback controversies and whatever the case may be, we all know what's really important, and we have lost a really good one in the NFL community, in the Giants community, and somebody who I think everybody associated with the Giants are going to miss Corey's presence and in the NFL. So wanted to say that and get that out of the way. Not get that out of the way, but really prioritize that and let you guys know that that's where I think everybody close enough to the Giants, where their minds and hearts are right now. And final thing, just to put a bow on it before we get into the football, is, this is in the NFL, but this is also in life in general. You just never know. You just never know how someone is feeling, how they're doing, whether they need a pick-me-up, whether they need a pat on the back, whether they need an attaboy, whatever the case may be. And so loved ones, friends, family, people who mean a lot to you, make sure you tell them, because you don't know if you're not going to get another opportunity to do it. So with that being said, my heart and thoughts and prayers go out to everybody who was a close family member and friend of Corey Cunningham's. And we will try to honor him by doing our best work in bringing updates for information and enthusiasm and excitement in the Giants conversation and about the NFL draft. So I'm going to tell you guys about a sponsor here, and we're going to get right to your questions and to the starting with the super chats that we saw coming in from some of our most loyal fans. Thank you guys. I saw those, and we will get right to them. BetOnline is your number one source for all your summer sports this season, from MLB, golf, NBA, and NHL playoff stats. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, let's get into the fan questions. Thank you guys for being patient, for being here, and for taking a moment with me to honor Corey. Jacob says, smash that like and sub button for Pat on your way in. I appreciate that, Jacob. Let's get to the very early super chats and super stickers. Thank you guys. Really appreciate you. MJ kicks us off. MJ with $4.99. MJ, thank you so much for the support. MJC says, still need a franchise QB, but happy we didn't force it. I do wish we got a defensive tackle, very thin there. I love the idea of another NASCAR package group. MJ, they do still need a franchise quarterback. Doing some reporting right now on what exactly people in the league and experts around the league would do if they were the Giants now that they did not get a new quarterback. I think that and the fate of the head coach and GM and the roster construction, all those things, these fall into the pot of top topics that will drive the conversation throughout the offseason and the season. Saquon Barkley being with the Eagles, right? Like, these are some of the headlining things that we're just not going to stop talking about. MJ, I agree. Not getting a defensive tackle. Also, for me, not drafting an offensive lineman was even a bigger deal to me than not adding a defensive tackle. I know they have guys they've drafted. I know that they signed some guys in free agency, but not getting a young swing tackle into the building here really worries me for them, both in the short and long term. MJ, I think getting that new NASCAR package, right, a new version of that NASCAR package, right, the Spagnuolo defensive line with Tuck on the interior, right, generating that pass rush that's difficult for those guards to handle in the middle. Hopefully that's something the Giants can get going, with the personnel they have now with Burns in the building, Thibodeau, Aziz, you have Dex, obviously, Nacho in the interior, and some young guys that you're hoping are going to give you more, Jordan Riley, DJ Davidson, and those types of guys. But I do think the lack of an offensive lineman stands out as well as DT, MJ, and I think that's a really good point. Chris comes in with $9.99. Chris, thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Chris says, I can believe that Brian Daboll was willing to put all his eggs in Jones' basket if he gets hurt again or they lose next year. Probably will not get a fourth year. Oh, so you're saying I can't believe Brian Daboll was willing to put all his eggs in Jones' basket if he gets hurt again or they lose a lot of games. Probably won't get a fourth year. Yeah, Chris, I think that's why this is such a conflicting time for the Giants leadership, because now they do have to go into the season with the current quarterback room that includes Daniel Jones and Drew Lock primarily as the guys who really are going to start games depending on how this season goes and depending on Jones's health and that type of thing. I think it's very clear based on my reporting and what we saw happen in the draft that the Giants were efforting to add a new franchise quarterback into the building. And listen, let's say hypothetically that they had gotten that deal done with Drake May and the Patriots at 3. Drake May wasn't going to be a day one starter for the Giants necessarily. Now, we all know that if you draft a quarterback that high in New York, right, you're drafting him and you're going to say, hey, let's project this out and maybe he can sit a year. He wouldn't have sat a full year. We know that wouldn't have happened. We know that wouldn't have been the case. We know in New York it's impossible. If you guys remember, and this, I'll just pat myself on the back a little bit here. This is a while back now, but in 2019, when the Giants drafted Daniel Jones, I went in mid-August on the air on FS1 and predicted on live television that Daniel Jones would replace Eli Manning in week 3 of the season. And a month later, he had replaced him in week 3 of the season. And so that was based on not only information I had, but also a strong read on the dynamics at play when it comes to being drafted that high, number 6 overall, like Jones was in 2019 in New York. Also understanding, let's say, how the coach felt, how the organization felt, how long a leash was, right? Like all those things when it comes to Eli Manning and the trade-off to Daniel Jones and that transition. And so now when we look at whether the Giants would be able to even rest a guy for a year if they had gotten a quarterback in this draft, that's not going to come to pass. But the point I was making is Drake May ultimately is a young player who would be here to develop and smooth in when he was ready. It wouldn't have just been a lock and load deal. And in fact, bringing in Drew Lock in that sense made sense because if Daniel Jones was not full health or the team truly was moving off of him, then you bring in Drew Lock on the 1-year deal with incentives. If May's ready in week 1, great. If he's not, you play Lock and then you work in Drake May, the young quarterback. But obviously that's all hypotheticals, and it's not even a hypothetical Evan anymore for this season because it didn't happen. They tried to trade for him. They didn't get him. And now, as you said, Daboll with all his eggs in this Daniel Jones, Drew Lock basket. All right, let's go back to the top. Thank you so much there, MJ and Chris, for getting us started. Looks like Lewis also comes in with $2. Thank you, Lewis. Appreciate you. Lewis says, is it crazy to think Lock is this best team's option? Lewis, I think you bring up a really good point. So here's one factor that was brought up to me a couple times by people during the draft weekend. And then when I talk to other people in the league and we discuss this really brings into focus, Lewis, just how much Lock really could be the main option for the Giants. And that is this. Daniel Jones, obviously, we know he's attacking his rehab. We know that Daniel is going to compete. We know that he's going to find his way to be able to be back on the field sometime this summer, early fall, whatever it is. Like Daniel is a worker, right? No one doubts that. But here's the thing. When he comes back, guys coming off ACL tears, he will not be able to run and be utilized the way that he is ideally used in order to play as effectively as he can and at his highest level. He's an athlete. So to me, along with the Giants' leadership and this regime trying to find another quarterback in this draft, specifically Drake May, that is obviously confirmation of everything we knew about what they were trying to do, right? But then factor in the fact that it's impossible to count on a player. Forget that it's Daniel, just any player coming off a torn ACL. It is extremely rare for that player to be able to come back and be able to use their wheels the way that they normally do, right? And so what I'm getting at, Lewis, is to answer your question and to address your point. I think that Drew Lock, now listen, we know he can throw those interceptions down the field, but he's willing to push the ball down the field. So with Malik Neighbors in the building, a quarterback in Drew Lock who isn't afraid to spin it down the field, and Daniel Jones likely not operating at 100% level of what he is best at, which is using those legs to complement his arm, I think there's no question it's a possibility, Lewis, that Lock ends up being the team's best and primary option. And I'll come back to this, and we'll talk about this a lot through the spring. Daniel, it's working against Daniel Jones right now, that Drew Lock is going to be taking all these reps in the spring. That doesn't mean Daniel Jones isn't going to take reps when he gets here in the fall and the summer. But what it does mean is that Drew Lock's going to get a ton of time to show the team, to show the coaches, to show the general managers, to show ownership, to work with his teammates, develop that chemistry. That's a pretty big deal, right? So, that's going to be something in a conversation that doesn't go away. And thanks for mentioning that, Lewis. As I take a sip from my old fashioned, thanks for being here, everybody. If you're listening on audio on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen, I appreciate you guys doing that as well. Shout out Uncle Peter. Shout out to everybody who is loyal here. We are over 2,000 subscribers now on the channel. And I really am just blown away by the growth of the YouTube channel and of these live chats. And it's all you guys, I know I'm spending the time. I know I'm trying to bring you the best knowledge and information and analysis that I can, but you guys are carving out times in your days and nights to be here, to follow, to be a part of this channel, to be a subscriber. Like I said, if you don't have them on already, turn those notifications on. It's a great way to remind yourself when these live chats are popping up, because it'll alert you the second I put it in there, and that it's coming up and that it's coming up later, and it'll give you the time. It'll ask if you want a reminder, all those things. Some of my friends who have subscribed, who are NFL fans, have said that that's a great way during their busy schedule. Shout out to Dan O. That's a busy schedule that they have. They come home, they got the kids, they got the family, they got baseball practice, they got all that. So it's a good way for them to remember to check in for 10 or 20 minutes or whatever it is, or maybe it's the full 2 hours, 2.5 hours. We've been going some of these. So thank you everybody for supporting. All right, let's get to the queue. Jacob says, any chance they already got reassurance about them not being on the hot seat? Jacob, I don't think that would be something that would occur. I did view this draft ultimately as a draft where after they didn't get their quarterback, they drafted for need. And I saw it as a draft where they targeted specific players, but also specific positions. That can be dangerous, but it also, to me, reflected a general manager and a coach looking at ways to try to plug holes in a roster to make the team the best they could right now, which reinforces to me the pressure they are under. Jacob says, I know people are upset about the Neighbors pick, but look, Patriots were never trading out. Rumor going around, we offered a 2 firsts and a second. Oh, by the way, Vikings offered 3 firsts if they turned down Minnesota's offer. I'd much rather take Neighbors than reaching for JJ, which in my opinion would be potentially Daniel Jones 2.0, because we reached on Daniel Jones instead of drafting a guy like Ed Oliver, Josh Allen, etc. Jacob, the news of the Giants trade offer is not a rumor. That is true. That is my report. I believe Albert Breer as well had that they included the 2025 first-round pick. But my sources told me the Giants included 2025 first-round pick, obviously their number 6 overall pick to move to 3, and the number 47 overall pick, so their second-round pick in this draft, the one they used on Tyler Nuen, the Minnesota safety. And so the Giants ended up including 2 additional premium assets in addition to moving up from 6 to 3, and they still wouldn't take it. You're right. Albert reported the Minnesota Vikings offer of the 3-1. So that was their 2 ones this year, 11 and 23, and next year's one. I always believe, though, Jacob, and I do believe still, after talking to so many people in the league about this, that if the Patriots were going to move out, and obviously ultimately they weren't interested in doing it at all, but I think the Giants really were in the best position. Like I talked to people who said the Patriots actually wouldn't have minded going back to 6. And there were people there who liked J.J. McCarthy. Not everybody, but there were people there who liked him, and they would have been cool taking him as the quarterback in the first round. But once they went to 6, they had no way of figuring out and guaranteeing getting back up to 4 with the Arizona Cardinals, who were staying and taking Marvin Harrison Jr. But if they went to 6, the Patriots and the Vikings, if they offered that ammo in a big way, the same kind of ammo to 4 to the Cardinals, maybe Monty Ossenfort's thinking a little bit differently. So not saying Arizona definitely would have taken that deal, but as we look at it now, and as I talked to people in the league, I actually had one source who said they might have gone to 6 if they knew that Minnesota wasn't going to come back over them. but they just couldn't guarantee that. So that's part of why in my reporting leading up to the draft, even though I had people telling me the Patriots probably aren't moving out, I also knew that if they did, it was probably going to be to 6 and not to 11. So it was really an interesting exercise in figuring out ultimately which way it was going to go. All right, we got Chris says, do you think this will be an open competition at quarterback? Chris, I think it should be. And here's one important reason why. Like Joe Schoen said in his press conference after the draft that their scouts and their personnel staff and the coaching staff and their job is ultimately to go out there and find players to create healthy, constructive competition on their roster that makes the team better. And if you're the GM, and this is something I'm going to include in my writing this week, you can't say our job here is to create competition at every position and then say, but not a quarterback, right? Like that does, I know that you're paying Daniel Jones a lot of money, but if Drew Lock ends up being the better player, you're putting the better player on the field. Now, then again, last year, Tyrod Taylor was the better player, and they were leaving Tommy DeVito out there, right? Everybody knew Tyrod Taylor was the best quarterback on the roster, and they still weren't always playing him when they should have. So that obviously had a negative repercussion, some of which is not always seen. But, of course, he didn't mind heading out in free agency to the Jets. All right, let's see. Dr. Garrett with a Jason Garrett icon and profile pic. Dr. Garrett. Jason, is that you? Dr. Garrett says, I think drafting no trenches is flying under the radar for a team that's been pushed around for so many years. I agree. And I think on here, Dr. Garrett, we were just talking a little bit earlier about how no D tackle, no O-line in this draft, really like borderline alarming, right? Especially, listen, I'm sure Tyrone Tracy will make some plays for them. That'll be exciting to watch in the return game, running back. But when you get back into that area of the draft, developmental offensive linemen, swing tackle, take a swing at some guys who can reinforce that line. Like I talked to Brian Baldinger about, Andrew Thomas. If it's Andrew Thomas and Jermaine Illuminor who end up winning the tackle jobs, Baldy's saying to me that Evan Neal can't swing tackle. He can't play the left. He's not going to play the left and right. So what are you going to end up being in a situation where Illuminor would go to the left? If Thomas gets hurt, then Neal goes in the right. Like you really want to just reinforce these things. And even the interior of the Giants offensive line, which is improved with Aaron Stinney and John Runyon Jr., and then even Austin Schlottman, the backup center, people like one guy, one source who I respect, an offensive line evaluator, said that he is the definition of, I think it was solid, I believe is what he meant. That was what he said about like him as a backup, as a veteran, maybe even mentor for John Michael Schmitz. But especially bringing in Carmen Bursillo, I know that you want your new offensive line coach to help develop the people who are already here too. But to me, you got to give him someone to get his hands on. Give him a pick, give him a new ball of clay to mold. I didn't like that at all. I agree, Dr. Garrett. I'm glad you brought that up again. All right, let's get back into the queue. Remember, if you purchase a super chat or sticker, it gets elevated to the top of the queue. I address it or answer it first. If you don't want to purchase one of those or you can't, don't worry about it at all. Just hit those thumbs up, those like buttons. That helps drive engagement. It helps tell YouTube and all the Giants fans out there the algorithm works for us and it brings more people to us every time you do that. We really appreciate you. And just subscribe. We love having more people here. We're over 2,000 on the channel, and we are climbing thanks to your guys' dedication and passion. All right. Tariq is here to bang the drum that he was right. He says, thank the Lord that the Patriots saved the Giants from themselves. Why do the Giants under the GM Joe Schoen regime stink so bad at drafting after the third round? So Tariq did not want to draft a quarterback, obviously, as you can tell. And he feels like ultimately that wouldn't have been the correct move. Still a split fan base on that call too, right? As we talk about this on the quarterback, some people believe that Daniel Jones is still the guy, and it's a good thing they didn't try to replace him, and ultimately they'll feel better for it that the Patriots didn't take the deal. And then there's people like me who, and listen, I love Daniel Jones as a person, as a guy, as a representative for the franchise. Like I'm a big fan of his. but I know how the Giants were feeling and thinking and acting going into this draft. And I know that ultimately they were trying to replace him. So it's very fascinating. Jacob says, besides Neighbors, who was your favorite pick? Mine was Theo Johnson, a lot of untapped potential, arguably the best tight end other than Bowers. Jacob, I have to admit, I was not high on the draft as a whole. Neighbors, of course, premier player. A great player to have on your team. Love him. Love the addition. He's going to help the offense. Obviously, he's instantly your top weapon. And as I wrote in the Daily News, he's probably the new face of the franchise right now, right? I mean, you get a star wide receiver from LSU. You let Saquon Barkley go to Philly. You fill that void with a top wideout who set the yards record in LSU history with guys like Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase and Odell Beckham Jr. playing for that program. So you got to love that pick. Not high on the rest of the draft. Tyler Nuen, high character dude. High character dude. Like, got to meet him, talk to him after the draft a couple times. Really, really, really like Tyler. Ball hawk at safety. Interesting pick. Seems to reflect that they don't believe Dane Belton's the guy next to Jason Pinnock. So now maybe it's Pinnock, Nuen, Jalen Mills in a three-man rotation with Belton trying to push his way in there if he can. But maybe Belton is relegated to special teams. We will see. Interesting if they're going that way. I mean, competition obviously is good. We'll see where they go. He's another Joe Schoen pick, obviously. Dane, another great guy. Yeah, but Theo Johnson obviously has potential and a seal and he has some upside to him. I mean, I talked to somebody who knows his game very well, said like he's a good blocker, pretty good receiver, not elite hands, but obviously had 7 red zone touchdowns. But sounds like the way that he can help best early on immediately is as a blocking tight end. And really, that's kind of how the Giants tight end room is shaping up, is like an extension of the offensive line. And I think ultimately they're going to be ending up using their tight ends to help their tackles and their line as much as anything, especially with Waller expected to be retired. I'm going to get more into the draft picks later, Jacob, but thank you for that question. He also says, are the Joe Alt rumors by Schefter accurate at all? They were not trying to trade up for Joe Alt. They were trying to trade up for Drake May. If they wanted to trade up for Joe Alt to 5, the Chargers would have gladly taken draft capital and moved back and then taken a different offensive lineman, or kept trading back and drafted another offensive lineman, because a lot of other teams weren't necessarily going O-line there, right? You were waiting until, what was it? We have the Titans went O-line. The Jets went O-line at the top there, right? But if you were the Chargers, you would have just picked up more draft capital and still been able to get, an offensive lineman who could help you at the tackle position. And that was just not something that was going to happen. They were trying to trade up for Drake May. That's my report. That's my information. I'm not going to sit here and have an information off with Adam Schefter, certainly. And Adam's a friend of the podcast and a friend of the program. But no, they were trying to trade up for the quarterback. Right. So the Chargers took Alt at 5. J.C. Latham from Alabama went 7. And then the next offensive tackle went at 11 to the Jets, and then not another one until 14, Talis Fuaga to the Saints. Jacob, I will tell you this, though. What is correct about the Schefter report is that there were people in the Giants building who were interested in an offensive tackle at 6. So I was talking to somebody very plugged in right before the draft, and they were telling me that it was going to be quarterback if they could, and if their guy fell to them. At that point, they weren't sure a trade was going to happen, right? And if it wasn't their quarterback who fell, this person said could be a tackle or a wide receiver. And at that point, my eyebrows went, because I thought, wait a minute, I think a lot of people figured, even though they could certainly use a tackle, that if it wasn't going to be the quarterback, it would be a wide receiver. You look at their depth chart, it's just insane, right? And this person was telling me, no, it could be a tackle depending on who's there. But sounds like the Giants front office and, evaluators and the people who are actually in the room making the picks, they were split on the top tackles in the draft. So there were people who liked certain tackles and there's one tackle, and there were some people who liked another. And this was one person who's plugged into the league very well, saying that they thought it was possible that at 6, if the Giants quarterback wasn't there, they could go tackle. But it could be a receiver, not only because they might have one of those receivers, Neighbors, Odunze higher on their board, but also because this person did not believe that the Giants front office, you have the ownership group, you have the Joe Schoen and his leadership team. He was not quite sure that the Giants had uniformity and a consensus on which tackle they would take. So if you look back at my X account, when the Giants were on the clock after the Chargers made their pick, I believe I listed, I don't remember the full list of names I put out there, but I believe I mentioned J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix Jr., 2 quarterbacks, Neighbors. I don't know if I mentioned Odunze or not. Neighbors, Odunze, and I mentioned Talis Fawaga, the Oregon State tackle. He's also a right tackle. Now, ultimately, if they took an offensive lineman there, obviously right now, and as of now, we don't know who it would have been. But I mentioned Fawaga there for a reason, because there were people in the Giants leadership team who were thinking, can we get our tackle here? But at least as my understanding was, they didn't have uniformity and a consensus on which one. Then obviously they thought very highly of Neighbors. And of course, ultimately, it was only May that they were looking for if it was QB. Obviously, Caleb Williams too, but he was never going to be available after 1. So really the Giants list looked like Caleb and Drake May. After that, it was a tackle conversation, but ultimately Neighbors wins out in the end. But all of that information, I know is a long-winded answer, Jacob, but that's another reason why, like the idea that they would have traded for Alt to 3. My understanding was there wasn't a consensus on the offensive tackle anyway. And also, I just was told by several people that this was the trade terms that they offered, and they were going up to get Drake May, the quarterback from North Carolina. If they could, it wasn't going to happen. And again, remember, the Chargers could have just traded back. If they really wanted Joe Alt, the Chargers, Joe Ortiz, Jim Harbaugh, I mean, they were sitting there begging somebody for assets to slide back, the board. So that's all. That's my information there. MJ says, Tyler Nubin's presser was perfect. Stayed in school for a degree and to play with his brother. Answers didn't sound scripted, and he handled some dumb setup questions well. Get him as a weekly guest. MJ, well said. Very well said. And to be honest with you, as much as, hopefully at some point on this podcast, we end up with Malik Neighbors and we bring him to you. But I agree with you, MJ. I think Tyler Nubin as a regular guest on this program would actually be a fantastic guest. And I think that's a really good point. And thank you for making that, and also for another super chat. Really appreciate you. All right. Joel says, Pat, what's your take on the QB free agents next season? Only chance to get a decent starter to give us a few years until we figure out the quarterback position. Yeah, so this is an answer I can give you guys early. This is something I'm writing about in the Daily News on Tuesday, but I can bring this to you now. This is part of the reason why these live chats are valuable. Let me take another sip of this old fashioned. So, listen, there are differing opinions depending on who you talk to on this stuff, right? So I'll bring a lot of voices and viewpoints to it. Not everybody thinks that the Giants ultimately are going to charge hard after an upgrade even next year, because they don't believe in tanking and just waiting to get a quarterback at the top of the draft next year. And it's hard to plan for that anyway. And then in the veteran free agent market, if they still have Daniel under contract and he has a semi-good season, then is John Mara and Steve Tisch, are they even going to look for another quarterback at that point? Has the ship sailed on landing the next quarterback at that point, given how the franchise feels about Daniel in like a so-so year, right? Like a year that's not terrible, but not great. So there could be that scary no man's land, okay? But Joel, to answer your question, and thank you for bringing this one as well, Like I asked somebody today, if you were the Giants GM, what would be your 2025 quarterback plan right now? And this person said, this is an executive with another team. They said, well, so you have Tua Tagovailoa, Geno Smith, Derek Carr, Dak Prescott, Trevor Lawrence, and Kyler Murray, theoretically, at this moment, as we sit here right now, could all be available depending on how their seasons go. Plus, you have the draft. So this was just one person articulating, like, let's just take the full picture of what it looks like and what the options could be. And that was kind of the lay of the land. Now, if you're Joe Schoen, wouldn't it be fascinating and maybe a good political play, right, to go get Dak Prescott from the Dallas Cowboys in free agency and bring him here and say, well, yeah, I lost Saquon Barkley to the Eagles, but we just stole Dak from this Dallas team that we can never beat, right? Now, that's just one, that's just one scenario, right? Who knows? But one thing that you can feel optimistic about right now, if you're a Giants fan, is this. Regardless of Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll and this current regime, maybe they turn this around with these guys in this core, maybe they don't. Regardless of that discussion point, Malik Neighbors could be the type of player who helps you attract free agent quarterbacks, who helps you attract free agents, who helps convince coaches and next general managers and this and that this is a better job than it's been. He really could be that type of weapon. We don't know what it's going to be until he does it, but he could be that type of weapon and that type of attraction and show and spectacle and kind of like special player and talent who can lure more talent to you. There's a possibility he could be that. That's one thing that's exciting right now. Doug says, what do you make of Schoen not trading up or down during the draft, especially with only 6 picks? Yeah, Doug, it's interesting. So, and I'll answer that and this question at the same time because Antonio said, hey, Pat, saw that you reported the Colts tried to trade up from 15 to 6. Do you know what their offer was? Antonio, I don't know exactly what their offer was, but that's a pretty large move. So you imagine it would have been pretty lucrative, right? And to go back to Doug's question, what do you make of him not trading up or down? Here's one thing to remember. If this isn't a win now draft, if the Colts are offering you something to go from 15 to 6, okay? So let's look at the trade chart, okay? The NFL draft trade pick chart, okay? So this is like that. This is the chart that Jimmy Johnson made famous, okay? Where he assigned a value, if people who are not familiar with, the former Dallas Cowboys head coach, he assigned a value to every pick in the draft. And it was a way for teams to gauge how much each team was worth, each pick was worth in the draft. So, obviously there's like a quarterback tax, right? So if you're trading up for a quarterback, then you're going to be including more value and it's not going to be necessarily compensatory to what you're getting because you're the desperate team. You're the team initiating it. You're the team charging all the way up for the quarterback. And this team is essentially saying, we're doing you a favor by trading out. And, we want all of this from you, right? So that happens. But the bottom line is when you're going from 15 to 6, you're really offering a premium as far as that draft trade chart goes. And you're going to end up even paying even more than you should to get there. Having trouble pulling this up, actually. Let me see here. I want to actually bring this to you because let's see. Okay. So we have first round. So the Giants' 6th pick would have been worth 1,600 points. So 1,600 points. And the Colts pick at 15 would have been 1,050 points. So they would have had to make up 550 points to get all the way up there. So 550 on the Jimmy Johnson trade chart is a second round pick at minimum. And if the Colts are trying to trade all the way up that far to where the Giants are, and they have a specific player targeted and they're that desperate, if the Giants are taking that trade, then they might even be pushing the Colts for a lot more there. You're saying, like, listen, we're going to throw pick swaps in here. We're going to take an extra late round pick as well. If you're coming all the way up here, we're going to take a first instead of a second because we know you desperately want one of these players. My information was that the Colts were trying to come up for an offensive player. There are some people who think it might have been Brock Bowers. Could have been Neighbors or Dunze as well. Some people think it's a Dunze. Regardless, I just went off on a tangent there. To get back to your question, Doug, if you're Joe Schoen and you have a ton of time and this is a long-term rebuild, man, a trade like that, a trade back like that, get more picks in this draft and more picks in next year's draft perhaps, still get a good player at 15, keep building this through the draft, right? That's a way that a GM and a coach who have a lot of time, that's the way that you can end up building a roster with so many holes, adding draft picks, as you said, Doug. Now, ultimately, it's easy for me to sit here and say that. Malik Neighbors, if he's the player and you think he's a franchise-changing player, sometimes even if you do have a little bit of rope and some patience from your ownership group, you say, hey, you know what? That offer seems really lucrative, but this player's I can't pass him up. He's going to change our team. He's going to change our offense, right? So that can mean that too. But I do believe, Doug, that it's instructive that Joe Schoen was trying hard to mortgage future assets to get up the board, but was offered a likely lucrative trade from 15 to 6 and turned it down. I do think that says something. I think you bring up a good point. Candy says, I like all the picks, but in my opinion, Drew Phillips can make or break this draft. He needs to be a very good starter to call this a good draft. Love what I see on tape of the running back. Yeah, I don't have it's hard for me to sit here and count on a majority of this draft class being huge contributors right away. But certainly you need them to help out. All right, Antonio says, would you still expect the Giants to add a veteran corner free agency at some point? Their roster seems to scream for a veteran addition later this offseason, Antonio. The problem is, are you attracting a high-end veteran corner still on the market with this team and its outlook for this season to sign a bargain deal to be your starter? That's going to be hard. Antonio says, who do you think starts at guard opposite of John Runyon Jr.? I think that is Aaron Stinney. If it's not Aaron Stinney, it's Jermaine Illuminor. But I think as of right now, it's probably Stinney. The thing is, if Runyon said he likes playing the left, even though he's played the right more recently in Green Bay, I still think like Stinney's been pretty much exclusively a left guard. So if it's Stinney Runyon, I think it's Stinney left guard, Runyon right guard. If Illuminor is playing guard because Neal is at tackle, I mean, that's a good thing to have. That means that Neal won that job and is playing better and is healthy. So if Illuminor somehow ends up at guard, are you moving Runyon to the left? Because Illuminor, even though he has played various positions, he really is a right side guy. So that's fascinating as well. Do I expect Darren Waller to retire? Yes, I do. Any update on how Graham Gano's recovery is going from that injury from last season? Not yet, but we should have something early on in the spring as OTAs get underway in mid-May. Savage Steve says, how are we feeling about the draft and the season goal? What should Giants fans look forward to this year? Steve, I think you should look forward to Malik Neighbors. I think you should look forward to an improved interior offensive line. I don't know how strong it will be, but I expect it to be stronger. So that's good news. I think you should look for at the moment, a resolution in some form to this Darius Slayton situation. Something is going to have to give. That's something that we're keeping our eyes on. And I think ultimately, one thing I think that stands out to me at the moment is I believe the defense is a bigger question mark than I think fans I've seen on social media in the last day are giving it credit for. It is exciting that Brian Burns is on this team now. And you do like that the Giants added more pieces on that side of the ball, recognizing that it wasn't just the offense they had some holes in. But I think personally, based on how I watched the last 2 years play out, I think that a scheme change is going to be a significant adjustment. I think that Wink Martindale was a very good game planner against opposing offensive coordinators and quarterbacks. And Shane Bowen could be that as well, but has to prove he will be that for the Giants. So I think there's a lot of unknown to the defense, not to mention the remaining needs we were talking about. Defensive tackle depth, outside corner. They have a lot of slot corners on the roster now, but who will end up ultimately winning that job and locking it down? Steve, I think what you look forward to above all is Joe Schoen has bet on Saquon Barkley out, Malik Neighbors in. He believes in the positional value of the wide receiver over the running back. Now, I think a fascinating lens to watch this offense through is through that lens, the lens of how much better and different and how much more do I like the short and long term as a Giants fan of this offense with my wide receiver and Malik Neighbors as our focal point instead of Saquon Barkley, the running back, as the focal point. I think that's an important one. Florio said, Michael says, is it true Mike Florio said about the Vikings tried to trade up to 5 to get Neighbors? I did not hear that, Michael. I didn't hear that. Hunter says, don't know anything about that running back or tight end we drafted. How are those guys? Tracy is a converted wide receiver. So, between him and Singletary, you have guys who can catch passes out of the backfield. Tracy's also a kick returner. I believe he was second in the Big Ten in kick return yards this past year. That was a pick for a guy who can help your running back room, but ultimately also can be your kick returner with the new kickoff rules that are encouraging more returns. And because the team isn't going to be running down the field on coverage, talking to people who saw it work in the XFL and studied it for the NFL, there's a chance to spring more big plays. And so the hope with Tyrone Tracy Jr. is that he can help them spring more big plays in the kicking game at minimum and also contribute on offense. One of those players, similar, these are different players, but Malik Neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson, Tyrone Tracy Jr., all these guys, Isaiah McKenzie even, these guys are like guys who can do different things, jet sweeps, work out of the slot, all those types of things, have some speed to them, right? Catch and run ability. So they give Brian Daboll options with where to deploy guys on offense. And Daboll, of course, expected to call plays this year, so really puts it all in his hands in that regard. Theo Johnson, as I said earlier, Hunter, good blocker, good receiver. This one person I was talking to said that they don't expect him to become a star or anything, but he can be a solid NFL player. And he did catch 7 touchdowns last year, so that's encouraging. Xavier Baker says, I'm claiming it, Danny for comeback player of the year and Malik for offensive player of the year. From your lips to God's ears, Xavier. Hope so. Joey B says, I'm at a speaking engagement with Carl Banks and Gary Meyers. Joey B, tell them both I said hello while on this live chat on YouTube on the Talkin Ball Live with Pat Leonard podcast and on the live chats Mondays and Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern. Give me that plug, please. It's funny that you're at an event with Gary right now because I'm having Gary Meyers, the longtime NFL columnist, covered the Giants, the Jets, Cowboys, the whole league. He's one of my mentors at the Daily News. He will be on the Talkin Ball Pat Leonard podcast. We are actually recording the episode tomorrow, Tuesday, April 30th. So look for that. Gary's been churning out some great books lately. If you haven't seen, please pick up his latest on the G-Men. And and just Google Gary Meyers on Amazon, pick it up immediately. And we will talk a little bit more about that book when we have him on the pod. But we're going to get into the quarterback issue. We're going to talk about teams around the league. We're going to talk about, I would assume, the Cowboys, the NFC East, the lay of the land, and get into all the big picture. He's also a Michigan guy, a Michigan fan. So he felt strongly about J.J. McCarthy and actually not as strongly about Michael Penix Jr., which was interesting. But shout out, by the way, first of all, CBS, huge mistake with Phil Simms not on the NFL Today show on Sundays, the pregame shows and all that. Huge loss for CBS, but obviously on the Believe Network, where we have our podcast hosted, Phil and his son Matt have been bringing it on the Sims Complete podcast. And I think they deserve some credit, public credit, for the fact that they had Michael Penix Jr. respectively. Matt had him ranked second on his rankings, like his top 5 quarterbacks in the draft. He had Penix Jr. ranked second for this entire draft. And Phil had him ranked third. And there was a lot of waffling from experts on would Penix be a second rounder, would be a first rounder. You guys know that I settled for the final month really on Michael Penix Jr. being a round 1 talent, right? And then eventually saying he was going to go in the top 15. But obviously he wasn't the second quarterback taken in the draft. But given him being drafted at 8 as the 4th quarterback taken, and really like the first one off the board after that, what turned out to be consensus top 3 as far as how the draft board was going to fall, I think the Sims deserve a lot of credit because I think a lot of people were not putting their money where their mouth was when it came to Penix Jr.'s stock in the draft, and I think they hit it dead on the money. So credit to Phil and Matt. All right. Grindstar says Big Blue playoffs this season. That would be fun. I love covering the playoffs. Jay Mazzella says, I'm glad this didn't feel forced to pick a quarterback they thought was less capable than Jones just to appease half the fan base. Hunter says, I think it speaks volumes, the picture Danny posted with Corey of them hunting together. Right. Yep. Corey Cunningham. Again, if you guys were unaware, if anyone on here was unaware, Corey Cunningham, former Giant, Cardinal, Patriot, passed away at 28 last week tragically and was beloved in the Giants locker room. And our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to him, his family and friends, and everybody with the Giants. Really has hit the team very hard. Where are my entertainers? Says, sounds like a good dude, RIP. Hirsch, what's going on? Good to see you. Noel, good to see you, man. Matthew says, any credibility to the leaked jerseys? Matthew, I'm not sure about that. I don't know. I will say this. Seeing Brandon London, my boy Brandon London, in Germany during the draft, I'll tell you, that made me think one thing. That made me think, I know they have the rights to Germany and all that. First thing I thought when I saw that he was on the ground in Germany with Amani was, oh, the Giants are definitely playing the Panthers this year in Germany. That was the first thing I thought. We don't have that confirmed yet, but I find it very hard to believe they sent the crew and Brandon London out there all the way to London to do that. Or I'm sorry, all the way to Munich, Germany to do that hit for NFL Network on the draft and for the Giants, and that they're going to be waiting a year. I'm not sure that's the case. Noel says, appreciate all of your draft coverage. Thanks, Noel. Any truth to the rumor the Vikings were trading up to 5 for Neighbors? Don't know. Try to get to that, but I don't know. Authentic says, perfect timing on a drive home. Authentic, you are the man. Thank you for being here as always and for helping drive this conversation. And Authentic is one of those very real people who has helped bring more Giants fans here. And I don't take it for granted at all. Thank you so much. And go follow all of Authentic's content too. It's great. Authentic and I are going to do a collab soon. That's upcoming. Maybe, I don't know, maybe during training camp, Authentic. We'll see how it goes. But, looking forward to that. Hirsch says, Pat, it looks like the Giants are kicking the can down the road in regards to the quarterback situation. Do you think the plan is to draft a quarterback next April? Hard to plan that, but like we said, there's some free agent options as well. Definitely not something they can really even be focused on at the moment because I think there's a lot of pressure on how this season goes, at least to go to a certain type of level in order for people to keep their jobs. But certainly the draft and or free agency next year are options, Hirsch. Hunter says, could the Giants next year, hypothetically crap, hits the fan, maybe in Buffalo we trade for Josh Allen, get him here, maybe pay big for a premier talent. If the crap hits the fan next year, it's going to be a new regime. OG Knockout says, what's up, Pat? OG, what's going on? Great to see you. Whoa, we have a big time super chat coming in here. Jump in the queue. D-Kit, my man, with a $20 super chat. D-Kit, appreciate you. D-Kit pushing to elevate himself into the Talkin Ball Live Hall of Fame right now. No, D-Kit's been a very strong recent contributor and helping us generate an enormous month in April. So every month, guys, we have had a bigger month each month than the last month. From, I believe it was starting in February. So like February, March, April, every month has been bigger than the last. D-Kit says, adding Neighbors and Johnson, the strength on offense shifts to the passing game. We also added linemen who are better pass blockers than run blockers. Daboll, Kafka should be airing it out on offense now. Big problem if points per game don't rise. D-Kit, you hit the nail on the head there. The tight end group also, like you mentioned Johnson in the pass game, but the tight end group with guys like Chris Manhertz, Jack Stoll, and even Johnson to an extent, that group now is focused on blocking, right? You have Johnson who you're hoping can be a receiving threat as well, but they're going to be an extension of the offensive line as well. And you hit the nail on the head. They're trying to shift to a team that throws the ball. That's what they're doing. That's what Joe Schoen believes in. That's what Brian Daboll believes in. Listen, I made this joke a couple times to people around the league. I think I sent it on here once, but people wondering about, Devin Singletary in the run game. And I said, does everyone remember that the last time Devin Singletary was Brian Daboll's running back in Buffalo, that Daboll never ran the ball, right? Like the running joke was that the guy never ran the ball, that he hated it. It was practically like cut the sheet in half. In fact, like he butted heads with Sean McDermott because McDermott wanted some ball control time. There were times McDermott felt that the Giants should, or that the Bills should have turned more to the running game and run the ball more and balanced it out and kind of played more strategically in that regard. And Daboll was using Josh Allen's legs, but really throwing the ball. But D-Kit is completely on board and completely accurate. And I think hitting the nail on the head with the way this is being constructed. And D-Kit, I hate to say this, but this is an interesting thing. The points per game going up, it's going to be tough for them to go up dramatically because right now, and you tell me if you guys think I'm wrong, this almost looks to me, and tell me what you think about this. This looks to me like it could be the 2016 Giants recipe for winning, which is we have Malik Neighbors, who is like the Odell Beckham Jr. shot out of a cannon, can score a touchdown at any moment, elevate our offense guy, right? But that team, remember, in 2016, they were not a high-scoring offense. They might have scored 14, 17, 15 points in a lot of these games, 19 points. I think they ended up averaging like right around 20, right? But they won with elite defense. That's why they won. They won with elite defense and with Odell like popping for a crazy play every now and then, right? I'm not saying this defense is going to be elite this year. In fact, like I said earlier, I have questions about whether it can be based on coaching change and holes in the defense, and you need some guys to step up. And can even Bobby replicate the level of play he had last year, right? These things, none of these things are givens, right? But I'm saying that the recipe for them winning this year, from my vantage point, looks more like a low-scoring elite defense way, with Neighbors being the shot out of the cannon spark rather than them being a high-scoring offense. I could be wrong about that. The quarterback obviously has a lot to say about it. But D-Kit, thank you so much for continuing to drive the conversation. And also for the $20 super sticker, setting a great example and really supporting the channel. And I can't thank you enough. Really amazing. All right. Let's see. Noel says, do the Giants have any plans to avoid the sluggish slow start to the season they had last season, i.e. have the starters play more in preseason? I hope so. I don't think the rookies are going to do like a ton during this rookie minicamp coming up in May 10th and 11th. Like, in other words, they get indoctrinated and, there's so much that's being thrown at them that they're taking on a lot mentally. And so it's not like they're just jumping on the field and running tons of plays and that kind of thing, right? But you like to see them accomplish as much on the field as they can right away because there's not enough time to get ready. So I don't like the fact that, I don't want to see anything being slow played. I don't want to see it. No, these are conversations along with like the Daniel Jones injury guarantee question, all that. The next time we end up having like significant press conference with the leadership, with Daboll, all that kind of stuff, these are the kind of questions that are going to be asked about the training staff, about the program, about getting guys ready, about making sure the team's ready, all those things. All right. Looks like we got another super sticker in the queue here. Comes from Dope Dez, 1967. Dez, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Pat, what I see is Brian and Joe trying to change the Giants into Buffalo. Not running got the OC fired. Yeah, they are. You're right. They are trying to change them into Buffalo. They're going about this the way that they saw it happen in Buffalo. The interesting part of that, Dope, is that they are trying to go the way the Buffalo Bills did. But how did the Bills turn their franchise around? They drafted Josh Allen, right? They traded up for Josh Allen. That's the answer. You could tell me about they built this, they built that, they got this player, they got that player, they drafted this lineman. No. They traded up twice and drafted Josh Allen. That's what they did. And then they went and got Steph Diggs in free agency, and that was like the next really key piece, right? So that's the Buffalo model. The Buffalo model is get Josh Allen, a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. Hard to replicate. Not to mention that in the end, even though Buffalo has been one of the better teams in the league for several years now, they haven't won, right? They've won games, but they haven't won, right? So, but ultimately, that's a fascinating thing to me, is that the Buffalo model stops when you say, oh, but they didn't go draft a new quarterback, right? So that's very interesting. I'm glad you brought that up. All right. OG says drafting Daniel Jones 6 overall was a huge mistake. Giving him all that money was a huge mistake. And depending on him to be great after 5 years is a huge mistake. Bangkok Baseball says, Talkin Ball, I love this show. Baseball, thank you so much for saying that. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate having you here. OG says, I hope it's Drew Lock because I'm sick of Daniel Jones' UFL QB play. Jay Mazzella says Daboll is not placing his eggs in the Jones basket and is not married to Jones. Were Schoen and Daboll supposed to trade as many needed future first-round picks for May? They are married to Jones right now because they didn't accomplish the trade. Matt Smith says Dan Duggan has been crushing the front office since the draft about preaching patience. Do you agree? No, yes, I agree that you can't say, well, this is what Dan said. This is what he said really in the lead to his column in The Athletic. He said that Joe Schoen said on the record a year ago or last fall that the Giants expedited the process in year 2 to try to win. So it's disingenuous to say now we got to preach patience and everyone wants instant gratification and this needs more time and this is a rebuild and all those things. The point is the front office in the Giants organization last year operated like it was time to go for it. I mean, listen, this is a fact. They were talking, like Brian Daboll, the people were talking about a Super Bowl at the start of last season. Kayvon Thibodeau went into last year thinking the Giants were going to be a Super Bowl contender because that's how they were talking. So that's where they were from a roster construction and season preparation standpoint going into last year. That's how misevaluating they were of their program and team. And yes, what I think is Joe Schoen correct that things don't happen overnight? Yeah, of course. But this isn't overnight. It's year 3. So Little Bulldozer says start Danny, not Drew. A2Z me, what's going on? Good to see you. Daboll is not a fan of Daniel Jones, he says. Locke will be inserted in at quarterback as soon as possible, in my opinion. Going to be another long season as a Giants fan. It is what it is. Kenneth Perkins, I don't disagree, A2Z me. Kenneth Perkins says, so basically Jones is a liability then, right? Yeah. Where are my entertainers says, what's up with the injury clause in the contract? Never heard that before. Jones has no guaranteed money in his salary for next season, 2025. But he has $23 million of his $30 million salary for 2025 guaranteed. If he gets hurt, that impacts next year. So in other words, if he plays this year and breaks his ankle or tears his knee again or hurts his neck again, $23 million of next year's salary becomes guaranteed. So right now, if they don't play him at all, he doesn't have any guaranteed money next year, and they can get rid of him. They don't owe him anything. But if they play him and he gets hurt going into next year, then there's a $23 million guarantee for 2025. Looks like you got another super chat in the queue. We have Peter Randazzo says, Pat, do you agree with Dan Duggan when he says it's year 3? Shane asking for patience is hard to swallow. Yeah. I've written a lot about this same topic. I think Dan hit it on the money, but we are of like minds on that topic. Here's my take on it, Peter. Yes, I agree. I agree with that, and that's something I've written about as well. And Dan did a great job with that column for sure. If you didn't see it, check it out in The Athletic. Dan does great work. But in addition to that, I think that, all right, I'm not saying it's the same exact thing, right? But when I was listening to Joe Schoen talk about, we have all these defensive players and pieces. They're all on these 2, 3, 4-year contracts. Let them play for several years. Let them grow together. Let them build together. This is what we did in Buffalo. You get some sustainability, and they become a group that essentially knows how to play together and become gelled. And that's the way you form chemistry and build a team. And he said, everybody wants instant gratification, but that's just not realistic. It wasn't Joe Judge in Chicago, right? Like Joe Judge in Chicago, obviously it was an impassioned speech where he was just letting loose things that he shouldn't have said out loud. But ultimately what Joe Judge's eruption in Chicago was an appeal to John Mara and the Giants ownership that wasn't being heard or heeded, but in Judge's estimation at that point needed to be said. And of course, it was unwise to say it the way he did it and to do it the way he did it. But ultimately, it was an appeal to ownership. Like, here's what needs to happen, not this. And as I was listening to Joe Schoen say people want instant gratification and talk about here's what needs to happen and we need to have patience here, I couldn't help but think about what this was not just a pushback against the media. It sounded like the message that he is stressing to Giants ownership as well. And that's my take. D-Kit checks in with another $10 super chat. D-Kit bringing the heat and bringing the fire and brought the wallet tonight too. MVP. D-Kit says, the team's been built to Shane and Daboll's vision. They brought in free agents, traded for Burns, drafted players they wanted. Don't understand why we shouldn't win now. Huge letdown if we don't. Yeah, and that's what this draft was. It was them trying to plug holes to go and win games because the pressure is on and it's time and it's year 3. No doubt. And listen, Giants ownership doesn't want to keep ripping up regimes. They don't. It's not like they're eager to do it. If they were eager to do it, Brian Daboll wouldn't even be the coach this year, given all the BS that went on last year. They're not eager to do it. Jay Mazzello says, if Shane and Daboll were putting all their eggs in the Jones basket, they would not have been trying to trade up to 3rd for May. This is clear. They're looking to improve all positions. Right. Stephen NJ says, concerns with Brian Daboll and coaches, but it seems to me the thing with Wink was undermining was with the getting the number for the player without permission. Seems like Wink was head coach of the defense and you're the head coach of the rest. Oh, I'm the head coach of the defense and you're the head coach of the rest. No, that was not what was playing out there. That anecdote was misrepresented. And my ultimate understanding of that was that the head coach had driven a wedge throughout the staff. And actually, it's misinterpreting and misunderstanding the whole situation to think that Martindale was generating the conflict, because as I reported in great detail, the conflict was throughout the coaching staff from the head coach and the head coach's seat, and his inability to cultivate constructive relationships with a lot of those gentlemen ended up resulting in this exodus of coaches from the staff. It was not a 1v1 head coach versus defensive coordinator type deal. And that is from detailed sourcing throughout the building and around the Giants and in the Giants about what was going on. Many people talking for that story, for that reporting, and that was months of reporting going into what was a disastrous season. And like I said, that anecdote about the player and the jersey number and all that was misrepresented. Hirsch says, Pat, is it your understanding that John Mara gave his blessing to draft a quarterback? Shane and Daboll only wanted Drake May and nobody else at quarterback in this draft. That is my understanding, Hirsch, that it was Caleb and Drake May. That's my understanding. I personally think they still should have taken a quarterback, but that's the way it looks. Omar says, will the Giants pursue a veteran corner now that they have landed their safety they targeted in the draft and also signed one more vet O-lineman? I think pursuing and trying to sign players at both positions is wise. Wonder whether they'll be able to lure the level of player they would be looking for. We'll see. Lewis says, if Jones can't push the ball down the field, Locke is the only option to me. I agree. OG says, Pat, I bet you Cam Newton can outplay every QB they have right now. I'll bet the house. I'm not upset about the Neighbors pick. I'm upset Neighbors doesn't have a QB to get him the ball. Very reasonable take there, OG. I appreciate you. Not sure Cam can throw anymore, honestly, with all the hits and beating he's taken in his shoulder. But I see your point. I don't disagree with your general concept of that point. Michael says, on the contrary, forget about quarterback. Shane had an excellent draft, although I would have preferred drafting Haynes or BB with the third pick. Michael, appreciate that that optimistic viewpoint and that opposing viewpoint of what some of these other Giant fans have said and feel about it. I think you seem to be, though, on the same page as everybody, that it really did feel like this was a draft to get an offensive lineman, at least one. Honestly, I would have taken two, a guard and a tackle. You got to keep throwing talent at that position. I mean, you haven't fixed it in, over a decade, right? So, and BB was a player that would have really helped them, and he goes to the Cowboys. On that note about BB too, one thing I'm concerned about with the Giants, how many nasty guys are on this team in the trenches? Honestly. And, I'm not challenging anybody, but I'm just saying you need to bring the nasty, man. Like in football, you need to have nastiness on your team. Cooper Beebe is using the word dirt as a verb. I love it. I dirt guys. That's what he's saying. I dirt people when I play football. Those are the people you want up front. So I agree with that, Michael. All right. Joey Killian checks in with a $10 super chat. Thank you, Joey. Really appreciate you, man. Do you think John Mara will ever give Shane full control over the team? I feel as if Shane and Daboll would have gotten rid of Jones day one if they could have. Joey, as far as I understand, Joe Shane is the general manager and he's making the calls. Do I think John Mara had a say-so in Daniel Jones getting that contract? Of course. Of course he did. Be naive to think otherwise, knowing how this organization works. But Joe Shane was the one sitting in that tight end room figuring out the parameters of the deal. And, you have Ed Triggs and Kevin Abrams working with the contracts, and Ed Triggs really the primary on the contracts and the front office working that. I mean, this is a situation where Shane is going to own this. He's the guy who ultimately made the decisions. I mean, there was a huge story, if you remember, I believe Albert Breer reported basically like the heroic finish down the stretch of how they got it done just under the wire with Shane grinding it. And at the time, it looked like a triumphant and was painted kind of as a triumphant action by the Giants to figure out these moving pieces of Saquon Barkley and Daniel Jones, right? And even I at the time thought, how I viewed it at the time was, listen, I know ownership was influencing this. So, but also Schoen and Daboll go in to make this deal and they figure this out and they sign him. So I thought at the time they did the best they could by giving themselves an out after 2 years with what the lay of the land typically is with the Giants franchise. But even that commitment turns out to have been too much and too overboard. Gerald, thank you for a $5 super chat. Says, Pat, next year if they go above 500 for the regular season but miss playoffs, Daboll and or Schoen fired. Gerald, above 500 but miss playoffs, then I think you see both of them back the next year. That's my answer. Knowing the Giants, the lay of the land, that would be my answer here and now. If they finish above by 500 but miss the playoffs, they would both be back the next year. All right, let me try to get through, keep getting through the queue. And I appreciate all you guys, man, with these super chats and these super stickers. Really just a ton of support for the channel tonight, and really every night we do these. So thank you so much. All right. Let's see. I got to get back into the queue here. Don't want to miss anything. Where are my entertainers? Says Tracy has the look huge. Steele at running back and returner. If Waller retires, do we still have to pay him this year? Says Will. So, Darren Waller's cap situation. So, if he retires, believe they can still make him like a post-June cut. So you can end up, really taking a minimal dead money hit this year. If you can make him a post-June 1 cut, then you can end up taking only like a $2.4 million dead hit, and you save, what is it, $11.6 million, I think it is. He got 22 guaranteed in salary when he signed the extension with the Raiders. Let's see. You know what? I have to get back to you on that. I don't know the exact number of the money that they owe him for this year. They did restructure his deal, but I do know if he retires and they make him a post-June 1 cut, they can really dramatically reduce the cap hit for dead money this year. OG says, even though I didn't want J.J. McCarthy or Bo Nix, Joe Schoen better hope they don't become all pros in this league or he'll look stupid. Oh, and Michael Penix as well. Yeah, definitely. Jacob says, Pat, you're right, especially when you have Haynes and BB on the board O-line. Let's see. Brett, what's going on? Good to see you, man. Jay Mazzella says, come on, serious? You wanted to pick O-line and line personnel in the 5th or 6th round. O-line and D-line are not good players that far back. It would have been wasting those picks. No, you can get developmental players to tackle there, Jay Mazzella. In this draft, you could. Jay says, now with the draft over, are Giants now looking into cheap vet signings to plug at corner and other spots? Yes. Jay, by the way, Jay Mazzella, by the way, just so you know, like I also think they should have gone earlier at those positions too. So just to clarify. But it stuck out to me even when they got into the back end. But second and third, I would have been, I would have rather a corner and an offensive lineman in 2 and 3, or I would say corner and D tackle. But really, like I thought they should have taken an O lineman like in round 3, maybe like corner round 2, O lineman round 3. I would have liked that a lot better. Where are my entertainers? Says QB impatient, no QB patient. Let's see. Michael says Drew Lock likely can stretch the field better than DJ. Lots of weapons among them. Think about a linebacker trying to cover Tyrone Tracy, Mr. Hybrid running back, wide receiver. Yeah, it'll be on Daboll to create mismatches for sure. He does have these weapons. Kenneth doesn't like Jones as a quarterback. Michael, I'm going to star that. I like that point. Our corner pick was a hard one to swallow with the talent still on the board, says Dr. Garrett. I agree. Yeah, that's Andrew Phillips, another good guy, but thought there were, if you wanted a corner, I know there were a bunch of corners that went earlier than the Giants were picking in round 2, but I would have liked to see them get a corner in round 2 and then go O-line round 3. Let's see. Hirsch says, I'll take Shedeur Sanders or Cam Ward over Daniel Jones any day. Where My Entertainer says, Nuen was my favorite prospect before he tested. He'll be solid regardless. Lucky to get him to replace the Bama kid, Xavier McKinney. Brett says, DJ is a dog in a corner. Go ahead and grab a hold of him. Mike K says, honestly, if this team goes 8-9, I'd be thrilled. I just want to see some progress and some wins against good teams. That's exactly what you should want to see this year as a Giant fan. More wins, right? A respectable team, a team that keeps its players relatively healthy, that can score points, that manages games well so that they're not shooting themselves in the foot and costing themselves games with poor game management, right? Just lay a good foundation. I agree with that, Mike. OG says the Giants have to play the AFC North, and they have all gotten better. 0-4 for the Giants. Then in their division, 0-4, maybe 1-3. And they're in their division, you're saying, all right, well, they would play 6 games in division. So you're saying 8 losses. You think there'll be minimum 8 losses between those two. Top 5 in draft next year for sure. Interesting, OG. Bookies.com sent me actually a notice today that the Giants are tied for 6th as far as the 6th hardest schedule in this 2024 season based on opponent records from 2023. So obviously, who knows how it eventually shakes out. We don't know this for sure, of course. But what we do have to go on right at this point is we know, and we don't even know the order of the schedule, which will be coming out in early May. But I think it's like May 10th or something like that. But without even knowing the order of the games for the Giants at the moment, bookies.com, strength of schedule by team for 2024 season. Hardest is the Cleveland Browns at 54.7% winning percentage. Ravens are 2, 53.6. Steelers are 3, 53.3. And then tied at 4, the Packers and the Texans at 52.6. And then tied at really 6, so 6 and 7 is the Bills and the Giants at 51.6. So strength of schedule, to OG's point, regardless of how you guys think they're going to do in all those respective games, OG makes a good point and brings that up, something I did want to talk about, which is that the Giants schedule, which when it came out, a lot of people said, oh, some of that seems favorable. Not necessarily. Mazzella says, Giants have many new pieces for the O-line and new premier edge Pro Bowl player from our second-round pick. Drafted players make 100% sense. Michael Knight, what's going on? Good to see you again, Michael. Thanks for being here. Hirsch says, if the Giants are drafting top 5 next April, you'd have to think we go QB. If they're drafting top 5 next April, they will have a new coach. The only question would be was if they have a new quarterback, a new general manager too. Could be both. Bill Belichick's a free agent. OG Knockout says, I got one for you. When is Daniel Jones going to beat the Dallas Cowboys? I'll wait. The record against the Cowboys and Eagles is frustrating and scary. Thankfully, they have a good taste in their mouths after beating the Eagles on the in the last game of this past year. But if they don't improve in their division, then the rest of it is not going to follow. David says, I have no idea how you got your job. Between Jordan Ronan and you are both worthless. David, thanks for being here. This community that we've built here, the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard YouTube channel and Talkin Ball Lives, we have not had anybody say something this disrespectful on one of these chats and on this channel yet. So congratulations on being the first person to be a Twitter level troll on our channel, on our lives. So thank you very much, David. David, honestly, I don't mind whether you disagree with everything I say. In fact, I love people like, I think it was it Michael earlier? Michael disagrees with a lot of the things I've been saying recently about quarterback and Daniel Jones and the draft, but he's bringing really good constructive dialogue to the conversation, to the channel. And that's what we want to do here. Like, We're not all going to agree. It's okay. We don't have to all agree. And what I want to do is have a healthy debate, but also bring information analysis. You could take the information I give you and not agree. It's okay. Or you could, reject the information I'm presenting to you. That's fine too. I would just ask you, please be respectful. Thank you. All right. We got another super chat coming in here. Who do we have here? All right. Gerald again dropping in, says the minute Daniel Jones hesitates on throwing a long ball, he's yanked for luck. Locke has a little gunslinger in him. Thoughts? Yep, Gerald, I agree. Well, listen, I think so. Gerald's somebody who watches a lot of Giants football because he was perfectly describing the type of thing that Jones sometimes does incorrectly to get himself in trouble when he's going deep or when he's making decisions under pressure, right? No, Gerald, I think that's true. Listen, I know this is revisiting something from before. So, I know some people were like, well, listen, we already talked about that before. Let's move on. Drew Lock signed here because he was told that he was going to have a chance to compete for playing time. And so maybe that means that they start Daniel regardless when he gets healthy, but that doesn't mean he won't have a short leash if he does. I personally think Lock should have a chance to beat him out. That's how you assemble a team. And I also think that even if he doesn't early on, he is here to be a quicker option behind Jones. Yes, I agree with that, Gerald. I do. Because jobs are on the line this year. Jobs are on the line, starting with Daboll's. Illa, what's up? Welcome back. Says, I feel like we drafted like we're in the position of the Eagles. Secondary picks made. We left some highly rated talent on the board to fill voids that didn't have to be immediately filled. Illa is the smartest, most that is such a great point. And this is to people like David who are just not making any reasonable points and just taking nasty shots at people and personal shots. And, we don't want that here, but whatever. But Illa is just watching the draft, and he's a Giants fan. He wants the Giants team to do well. He wants them to make good picks. He's not going to sit there and say he's an expert and Joe Schoen isn't. But he's looking at how they are selecting players and where and why, and just being honest about what he's seeing. What Illa just described is what happened in the middle rounds of the draft for the Giants. He is completely accurate. What they did in this draft, the Giants, was after they didn't get the quarterback, they made it a need-based draft to try to plug holes to have a good enough team this year to win enough games to continue progressing and save their jobs. That's what happened. And listen, you don't blame, and I don't blame Joe Schoen for sticking his neck out and saying, I believe this safety is the guy. I'm taking him. I don't care if you have him ranked lower than I do. I'm taking him. Or I don't care if you think I need a developmental O-lineman or a young guard who could try to beat out Aaron Stinney in week 8. We need a starting safety because I let Xavier McKinney go to Green Bay and we need that player, right? So listen, those moves could work out or they might or they might not, right? We'll wait and see. But I do agree with Illa's point, and I do think it's motivated by the pressure the GM and the coach are under. Super Unknown says, I'm extremely disappointed with this draft, especially since they did not even make any attempt to pick quarterbacks in the later round. Where are my entertainers? Corrects me, says Fuaga's name is Fuanga. Okay. Thank you. Where are my entertainers? Hirsch says, if Alt was available at 6, did the Giants go Alt or stick with Neighbors? Good question. We'll never know. OG says, look like Kansas City will be in the Super Bowl again next year. Maybe. Hirsch, to be clear, my understanding was that there was a split a little bit on which O-lineman they liked best. So it's still possible they would take Neighbors because they had Neighbors as their clear-cut wideout. And maybe on the horizontal board, it was 2 offensive tackles and Neighbors, and they couldn't settle on the tackle, but they knew Neighbors was that high, right? Noel says, did the Giants have Marvin Harrison Jr. ranked higher than Neighbors? Joe Schoen's answer, he was asked directly if they had Neighbors as the number 1 wide receiver on their board. And he said, well, we had a lot of guys. There were a lot of guys there who made sense for what we were trying to accomplish. He was the number 1 guy available to us when we were on the clock. So that answer to me implies that Marvin Harrison Jr. was the number one receiver on their board. Where my entertainer says Neighbors, Nubin, and Tracy are all fantastic picks. Robert says, in my opinion, solid draft, filled a lot of needs, but not taking O-line is worrisome since that was a 23 biggest weakness. Where are my entertainers wants Riley Leonard next year? OG Knockout says, Eagles counter all the Giants moves in the draft. I love the Neighbors pick, but the Eagles got something for him, especially with a trash QB like Daniel Jones. OG is out on Daniel. DeIlla says Cousins and Goff may be options as well. Where my entertainer says, oh shit, he went to Duke too. Never mind. Oh, and Riley Leonard. Let's see. DeIlla says this fan base would lose it, not in a good way. That's reaction to the Dak Prescott signing. Robert Mead says Goff is good, but he's terrible under pressure. Reminds me of Kerry Collins. Entertainer says, too bad you don't have Saquon with Neighbors. That would have been nice. Indeed. DeIlla says, oh, he's a statue just like Collins was. Doesn't have nearly the arm. Hey, he may be the best available option if the Lions ever move on to Hendon Hooker. Mousetrap says we should have no interest in the Cowboys garbage. Jay Seward says Dak is not a better option than Jones. He's had better supporting cast and has as many playoff wins as Jones. Interesting. Dak's definitely a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. Sorry. I mean, let's give him a little bit of credit. But you're right. He's fallen flat in his face in the playoffs. Brett says, why did it take 6 years to get a number one wide receiver? Ooh, here's a really good question, Brett. Well, because years like last year, they traded a third-round pick for Darren Waller, and within a year, he's considering retirement. OG says, Pat, deep in your heart, players don't want to come to the Giants. That's why they overpay for them to come here. The Giants are the new Cleveland Browns of the past. TV says people wanting Jones to fail should find a new team. Yeah, nope. Listen, I do not want Daniel Jones to fail. Daniel Jones is a good person, a hard worker. I would love for Daniel Jones to succeed. I would love it. So I'm not rooting for that at all, TV. Trust me. And no one should root for that, right? But I don't think it's unreasonable to think that it's time to replace him, especially when the Giants think that. All right. Let's see. We have another super sticker in the queue. Joey Killian says, do you think any of the QBs left by the fourth round would have been worth taking just to have them sit and develop this year? Rattler, Milton III, etc. I do, Joey. I do think that, Joey, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate that. The $5 there. Don't take lightly, by the way, anybody's support of this channel, whether you're doing a super sticker and a super chat and paying money to have your comment or question elevated to the top of the queue, or you are just hitting the thumbs up, the like button while we are live, or you're subscribing when we're done, or you're turning on the notifications on your YouTube page, on our YouTube channel, so that on your phone's lock screen, you are getting it delivered right to your phone. It is reminding you, Pat Leonard will be live tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern. However you guys support me and support us and support this community, I thank you so much. Really appreciate you. Yeah, Joey, I do think that would have been worth it. I was mentioning Spencer Rattler in the middle rounds because I had people telling me that he was a possible target for them in those spots. I mean, I know that he's not the typical height and all those measurements that the Giants have going for them in as far as their quarterback evaluations. But I did think that Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen ultimately were going to come out of here with some quarterback to develop and to get into the building and to work with, especially because I know DeVito is a cult hero, but he's not an answer if he has to play with you. And we know that. Like last year was a nice magical ride, but that's not the answer. You know what I mean? So that surprised me. Milton, some people in the league, I know they were confident they were going to take Milton very late in the draft. I know even our guy Phil Simms said that if it was in the fifth round, he would have loved to take a guy like Joe Milton the third and develop a player like that, work with a guy with a big arm like that and see what you could turn him into. You know, he's a project, but you're taking him in the fifth round, see what happens. I think for Brian Daboll, that would have been the better thing too. I think Brian Daboll, you know, you talk about the clock that he and Joe Schoen are under and the pressure they're under. You draft a quarterback, and not in the fifth round, but if you get to develop a guy and you show some progress in that, that can buy you time. And they failed to reset the clock with this draft by not taking a quarterback and not getting their guy high ultimately. Robert says, I'm low-key hoping we get Archie Manning when he comes out of college. Right, Arch, yep. But what are the odds of lightning strikes twice? The interesting thing too, Robert, is remember, Eli Manning and Drake May have a good relationship. Eli was working with him in the pre-draft. And so for the Giants to fall in love with Drake May and to want him and to try to trade up and to try to mortgage next year's first for him, you would have had to imagine that would have come with the stamp of approval from Eli Manning, right? So that's what's interesting about that as well. Dak had a better supporting cast in Dallas than J.R. Ewing, Hirsch says. OG says Daniel Jones has already failed. Jones had an awful O-line. Backups look better when right tackle position settled down a little, says TV. Mike Marto says, in no way should the Giants have reached for guys like Nix, Penix, or McCarthy. They did the right thing after failing to trade up for May. Mike also says, continue to build the team, find a new QB next season, whether that is the draft, trade, or free agency. A lot happens in a year. OV says, are the Giants waiting for Arch Manning? And can the Giants not fire the coach and GM because they don't have their QB? Well, they do have their QB in the sense that they re-signed Daniel Jones. So Daniel Jones is their QB now. And that's part of the concern for them. They could end up being fired without ever having, drafted the QB, their QB, quote unquote, in the first place. They tried to trade up for Drake May, so they weren't waiting for Arch Manning by trying to trade up for Drake May. But he could be an option for them 2 years down the road. Where My Entertainer says, almost never a good idea to move down from inside the top 10. Take the elite guy. OG says, man, Eli Manning won his last Super Bowl with a horrible O-line. What are you talking about? This isn't Madden. Right. No, well, that's the thing is, OG, you bring up a good point. And I've brought up this point a couple times to you guys, I think, but when you get a quarterback who can push the ball down the field and receivers who can go get it, it comes into focus that your offensive line doesn't have to be perfect, right? If the quarterback can use his legs to extend plays, can push the ball down the field with his arm, and you have receivers who can create separation there, then you can play the game without being so ticky-tacky, perfect about every little thing about your line. That's a good point. DeIlla says, knockout. Hey, at least we got Jones, a pass-catching running back, to dump the ball off. OG says, Joe Burrow went to the Super Bowl with a bad O-line. You know why? Because he's special. Robert says, I feel they threw Coughlin and Eli under the bus and have been cursed since. Brett says, how many picks too early will we take Arch Manning? I'm going with 30. Salient, what's going on? Good to see you. Mike says, Arch isn't coming out in 2025. Ewers is the starter and a very good one at that. Big Dog says, D-line might be the best unit. Well, it's going to have to be, Big Dog. I'm glad you brought that up. Is it their best unit? We'll see. Does it need to be based on their construction and the investment in it? Absolutely. Let's see. R0B says Arch won't be coming out till 2027. Robert Mead says, I think the Giants defense will carry the team this season, same as last season. They need to. Big Dog says we cooked this season. Hirsch says Schoen and Daboll will be gone before Arch comes out. I agree. OG says, look forward to Neighbors being frustrated with Daniel if that's his QB, just like Odell was when he was here. Authentic and I both laughing at that. Authentic is just a man of the people, man. Look at this guy. Huge part of our community here and creates great content of his own. What's up with Darius Slayton? I always liked him, says Entertainers. Slayton has not shown up in the spring over his contract. He has led the team in receiving for the last 5 years. Feels like he is owed more. I personally think this is a guy looking at, well, if they're going to give me more money, great. If they're going to trade me because they don't want to pay me more money, great. I go to probably a better offense in a contract year. Let's see. All right. Do you know if Locke has support in the building, meaning at first signs of Jones struggling, would they not hesitate to put Locke in? I do believe he has that kind of support. Ultimately, how he performs in the spring will either solidify that or undercut that. Salient says, what are the odds, Vegas odds, around Drew Lock beating out Daniel Jones for the starting job by week 4? I think, here's another one. I think there's a chance that Drew Lock starts the most games at quarterback for the Giants this season. That's how I would put it. DeIlla says, I like our pass rush, but I still think quarterbacks are going to neutralize the rush with the short passing game. Will adjust to stop the short game and get beat over the top with their inexperienced options. Easy says, y'all so negative, such a great way to think about your football team. Where's the positive energy? You are some comment GMs. Easy, please bring us the opposing side if you feel like there's other people being too negative. We love all sides of the argument and of the conversation. Chris says, Tyrod had support last year and they kept him bench for Cutlets. So, exactly. Big Dog says, Pat, how many wins do you realistically see this team having? Big Dog, my personal opinion is they win somewhere between 4 and 6 games at the moment. I want to see the schedule and I want to see the final construction of the roster before I obviously solidify that. But I'm leaning towards 4 or 5. Let's see. R0B says when Tyrod was ready, they put him back in. No, they didn't, R0B. They did not put Tyrod back in when he was ready. They kept Tommy DeVito in for a game and a half. They kept him in for the New Orleans game, which was a disaster. And then I think for the first half of the Eagles game the next week. And then Tyrod came in and lit it up in the second half. But ultimately, it was too late because the Giants dug a hole with DeVito in. Robert says Locke gives the Giants a better chance to win than Jones. Joey B got Gary's book, and he's having it signed. Joey B, what way to go, man. Let's see. Jones haters need their daddy. When he's had decent protection, he's looked good, says TV. Brett M says Gary Meyers' book about the Giants should be called We Can't Block for Shit. Harsh. Not unfair compared to as far as the first half of last year. I don't think Atlanta made a bad move. Big Dog, I'm glad you brought that up. We've been talking a lot of Giants, but how about the Falcons, man, taking Michael Penix Jr. 8th overall after that Cousins signing? Listen, I'm a big believer in solidifying and the quarterback position, making sure you have depth, making sure you don't miss out on elite talent there. Even if you have one, doesn't mean you don't take one, all those things. But what's strange about this is that, well, first of all, for me, being around in NFL teams now long enough, you are screwing with the dynamic of your entire team here because Kirk Cousins is pissed. And I don't blame him for being pissed because he was a free agent who made a decision to go there based on various factors. And now those factors, a lot of them have changed about the lay of the land. Obviously, he went there primarily because of the money and the fact that they had some infrastructure. But I don't blame Kirk Cousins and his agent for venting about this. I think that it's strange for the team to pay Kirk that when they were going to invest this kind of asset in Michael Penix Jr. I do. And I ultimately think it's very strange and reflects, kind of a fly by the seat of their pants mindset. This is from a team that did not hire Bill Belichick and essentially shoveled dirt on top of his grave. OG, yeah, A2Z me says RIP Corey Cunningham. RIP Corey Cunningham. That's right. If you guys missed it at the beginning, we just, wanted to honor Corey Cunningham, the late Giant and Patriot Cardinal, and just a good person, a great friend of a lot of people on the Giants, players, staff around the Giants. Somebody who's going to be deeply missed. His passing has hit everybody very hard in and around the Giants facility and building. And please keep him and his friends and family in your prayers. OG says, so far, Gettleman's picks are looking better than Shane's. Joe better hit on this year's draft, or will we be looking at him like what's going on? This roster should be better now than it is. It is 2024, and especially on the offensive line, this needs to get fixed now. Yep. Let's see. Bookend says, I'm glad JJ wasn't around in the late first. Woo. Rosario says, what jersey number will Neighbors wear? I don't believe that is official. So, yeah, I will get that to you, that information to you when I have it. Let's see. Authentic says, salute, Pat. Salute back to you, Authentic, my man. Chris says, I am here because of Authentic. See? Exactly. Authentic, huge supporter and has gotten the word out about our channel. Joey B is another one. All you guys, really can't thank you enough. Looking forward to the collaboration, Authentic. We got to do it. Sean Foster Shepard says, I'm probably in the minority, but I believe Jones is about to have a great year with Neighbors. Wandale and Hyatt will be better also because of Neighbors. And Sean, I'll say this. Like, I remember having a conversation with Daniel Jones about Odell Beckham Jr., and I was telling him about Odell because I saw Odell with the Giants, and Jones was still in college then. And there's definitely a part of Daniel that understands that it would have been nice for him to have a chance to play with Odell, and that it was a shame that he missed out on it. So this is kind of giving him the chance to play with that game-breaking LSU wide receiver, even though it's not OBJ. Dilla says, Authentic's just in here trying to pull some inside info. Thanks for all your help with the shout-outs, Authentic. Really do appreciate it, man. Authentic's got his info too, man. Crunch Bunch says, any concern with how Neighbors' personality meshes with the locker room, especially DJ, if he can't get him the ball? I don't know Neighbors well enough to know that. I know there were some character concerns during the pre-draft process that were discussed, but ultimately, I would say he's 20 years old, only 20 years old. So maturity issues could come with a guy who's 20 just because he's 20, regardless of anything else. So we'll see. We'll see. I don't know. I can't speculate on that at the moment. But I would say this, Crunch Bunch. If the Giants aren't getting Malik Neighbors the ball, they will have bigger problems than Malik Neighbors being upset about it. Because as this offense is constructed, if you're not getting him the ball, you might as well pack up and go home. OG says, two big mistakes Gettleman made were Barkley and Jones. Let's see. Patrick, thanks for commenting. I'm not exactly sure where you're going with that, but please continue to comment. Appreciate you. OV says, what's the expectation? 5-6 wins? Do they keep their jobs? I think 4, 5, or 6 wins, and at least the coach gets fired. Maybe the GM. The coach definitely. It's possible, though, both. But we'll see. It's possible they could win more, too, and I could be wrong. Brett says, will we get a high-dollar lineman or trade for one? I hope so. Would be an unusual time to do that, but they definitely need more to be a roster that makes you feel better. Hirsch says all depends on the quarterback, in his opinion. OG says Authentic and the Beard are one of my favorite Giants content creators. Much love. Crunch Bunch says that video of Schefter saying the Giants want it all has to be smoke in order to make it seem like they're all in on DJ. They clearly wanted May. That's how it read to me, Crunch Bunch. But again, Schefter, friend of the show, friend of the program, not going to impugn his reputation here, which is obviously sterling, and he is the lead insider and newsbreaker in this industry. But that's not the information I have. That's what I would say. Everybody's showing each other love. Authentic, DeIlla, OG, appreciate you. Problem cost the Bills a shot at a championship in the long run, says DeIlla, for how they constructed it and went and got Allen. Miz, what's going on, man? Welcome, Miz. Appreciate you. Jacob says, Pat, do you think they see Neighbors or as Daniel Jones as Stephon Diggs? Yeah, I think he's going to have to be. I think that's a good comparison for how they try to build this. Right, Miz was referring to when I said this could be the 2016 season. He remembered it was at 16-13 every game. Daboll would love to air the ball out, says Crunch Bunch. But he also has to win games to keep his job, meaning conservative offensive game plans like 2022. If they're conservative, he will not be here next year, and they will not win. Miz says Landon Collins had a big year in 2016. Interesting thing about 2016, I was so close to that team. You're right. Landon had a big year, right? There were a lot of guys who contributed. Vernon was good. Odell is a freak, obviously, all those things. Jackrabbit, Janoris Jenkins that year was the best player on their team. Like, he completely shut down one side of the field on the defense for the majority of the season. He was awesome that year. And a lot of times it resulted in him just like either not seeing the ball a lot or only having one pass breakup or whatever it was. But his tight coverage that season was the defining factor of how Spags' defense that season dominated. Landon was great, but Rabbit was their best player. And that was just my opinion. OG says, authentic, same here, bro. Keep up the great work. Can't wait to see y'all show for real. Miz says, if you can't sustain drives, the defense will burn out. No doubt. All right, we got someone else checking in with a super chat. Looks like it is MJ again. MJ bringing it. He says, I'm ready for a new quarterback, but let's not forget 2022. Daniel Jones' 119.3 passer rating on deep passes was third highest in the NFL, while his 43.5 deep completion percentage ranked ninth. With time, he's good. Yes, the problem is, MJ, obviously, and as you know, as you're referencing, like Daniel Jones is, or in the NFL, it's unrealistic to expect a ton of time available to throw the football in key situations. You know, it gets messier even the deeper you go in the playoffs and all that thing. You just have to make plays under pressure, muddy pockets, all that kind of stuff. And I would throw in this, though. Not only let's not forget 2022, MJ, let's not forget when he was a rookie with Pat Shurmur and was running that offense, which encouraged more downfield throws and those layered concepts, right? Like kind of the three routes over one another on one side of the field, right? Daniel Jones, I know he turned the ball over a lot that year, and he was holding the ball, waiting for things to develop down the field. And yes, the ball security wasn't there and all that. And of course, the turnovers were a huge problem. But he put up yards and points, right, compared to what he's done since then because they were trying to rein in the turnovers. So I do think your point, listen, this is why Daniel got paid a 4-year, $160 million contract. Because there have been times that he has played at a certain level that have made the Giants and people say, well, there it is, right? So I think you make a good point, MJ, and thanks for bringing that up. All right, let's get back into the queue. You guys are really bringing it, man. I'm going to try to catch up to you guys. It's been hard tonight, though. You're really bringing it, and I appreciate that. I'm going to get to all of it. Don't worry about it. All right. Entertainer says Daboll's obsession to throw every play ruined those Buffalo teams. They were a brutal watch, too. Got to have some balance. You do have to have some kind of balance. Even the Cowboys with Kellen Moore struggled with that. You know, good offense, good passing game, didn't run the ball enough in key spots to control games. Not running the ball in the East won't work out well. Wake up call incoming, says Tariq. Fair point. Modern NFL, but also how do you win in this division? Right. That's a good point. Again, balance. Miz says, scary to me. Rich offensive line draft, and we draft 0 O-linemen. OG says, Pat, I think by week 7 we'll be talking about the draft. I'm trying to be optimistic, but I've been fooled by fool's gold with this team too many times. Yeah, and I know you're down, OG, but it's okay. Like, that's the thing. It's okay to be a fan right now who really believes that this draft went well and you feel like it's going to go better than other people believe. And it's okay to be OG in the position where it's just beating you down a little bit, all the losing, and it's been a drag, and it's hard to see the light, right? Like that, you know, I understand both sides. Crunch Bunch says at the draft presser, Shane sounded like he and Daboll have a longer leash than we think. He emphasized patience going into year 3. Do you think Meyers giving them grace to find a new QB next year? I viewed that as a call for patience, not the fact that he thinks he has it. That was my takeaway. Anthony said, wanted to see the Giants pick up Jordan Travis early day 3 as a flyer in case he comes back from injury, the same dude he was at FSU. Anthony, all I know is not only would it shock me that they didn't take a quarterback at all, but when the Jets took a quarterback before the Giants, that's when I went, that's it. DeIlla says, we have to figure out how to stop the run as well. 29th ranked run D. That front seven has their work cut out with them for so much of that unit remaining the same. Yeah, no doubt. 2 straight years now, even when Wink's defense was carrying this team, forcing the turnovers, they haven't been able to stop the run. Very, very good point. Let's see. Crunch Bunch says in 2025, Dak with our weapons and a defense that just needs a couple pieces sounds very intriguing. If Schoen and Daboll survive this season, do you think they'd entertain paying the bag for him? I don't have any insight on whether they're evaluating Dak as their primary target, but I was just talking with another executive about, potential scenarios that could work out. After the 3rd round, the Giants draft to fill out the practice squad, says Tariq. Yuck. Anthony says, likely we either trust Daniel Jones to carry the Giants to the playoffs, and I'd like to see a full season of Jones with an offensive weapon outside of Saquon. OG says, Jones isn't Josh Allen. He's more like Orlovsky. Walsh says, or we try to throw the season for Shedeur Sanders. Any Aaron Robinson expectations, says Maurice. No, I wouldn't count on Aaron Robinson at corner, Maurice. Bangkok Baseball says, Pat, if Daniel Jones can't get the ball downfield consistently to Neighbors, how many games does he get before Daboll gives him the hook for lock? I would say immediately. Anthony says, and the offer needed to move up to 3 was absolutely awful. Moving up would have been a crippling move for this franchise. Yeah, but also if you're the GM and coach, it's the offer to try to reset the clock, get your guy, try to turn around the team, the offense, the franchise, and if you spend that 1st round pick for Drake May and he doesn't work out, well, it wasn't your pick you used, right? Because you're not even here to see it pass by. B. Dards says, I think because of many reasons, including financial, they will eventually make Locke or Cutlets the starter unless DJ stuns in camp. Cutlets. Listen, Tommy's a good guy. I'm happy for him, but that would be, I mean, Big Dog says thinking Super Bowl with this roster last year was absolutely crazy. Anthony Walsh DJ will be the starter until we have someone ready to step in and take over, he says. I disagree. But we will see, Anthony. OV also couldn't believe that they were talking quarterback last year or Super Bowl. There's 0 reason to cut him at the moment. We would simply go 0-16, says Anthony. Locke had issues remembering his college playbook. Wouldn't hold my breath on him, says Bookend Tackles. OG says, at this point, give me Cam Newton or Tim Tebow, RG3. I'm desperate. Not impressed with the tight end's production in his underwears. Pause, says Tariq. All right, Tariq. Getting frisky. Dilla says, I kind of feel like they're doing the same with the 2 early secondary picks. Positions just couldn't wait to be filled. If we're practicing patience, just take 1st-round talent, Adonai Mitchell. Jacob Petruzzi says, Pat, does it has to be a season-ending injury for the clause? Does it have to be a season-ending injury for the clause to get activated? Jacob, I believe it has to be an injury that compromises the following season. Like, I think it has to be, in other words, an injury that impacts the player's availability the following year. So what that's actually something I have to look into. Like, does it mean when the league year resets if he's hurt, right? Like when it becomes March 15th next year, like just some kind of threshold there. Like, I don't think if he just like turns his ankle in week 5 of this year that an injury guarantee kicks in for 2025. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure it has to do with how it impacts him being available like in the off-season program next spring and going and thereafter. Entertainer says, my bad. I knew about the weird contract. I meant, where did that come from? I've never heard of a player of a clause like that. Great content, man. Thank you, entertainers. Players have injury guarantees in contract, but it is unusual, entertainers, the way that the Giants like seemingly and on the one hand protected themselves after year 2, but then there's like that poison pill where it could lock them into a lot of money on year 3. Anthony says, I want to know if Waller is retiring ASAP. This dude needs to let me know if I'm drafting our rookie tight end in fantasy this season, last round. Anthony drafted tight end. I don't expect him to play, but we don't know officially. Miz says, Pat, I give you a name to start warming up to, Bill Belichick. I agree, Miz. Did you notice, says Crunch Bunch, Shane saying that Aziz was under contract for 3 more years at the draft presser, foreshadowing of a cheap contract? Crunch Bunch. That's actually really funny. So Shane slipped. He meant to say Okereke, and he slipped and said Ojulari. So we, right after the presser, he gets up and stands up, and we're all like, Joe, did you mean to say that, right? And he said, what did I say? Ojulari? Oh, no, I meant Okereke. So in the transcript, they corrected it. He meant to say Bobby, but we all thought, wait a second, did you just sign Aziz to a 3-year deal when you said that, right? So no, he meant Bobby Okereke. Authentic says, very well said on the patient stuff, reported by Duggan. Thanks, Authentic. OG says, I guarantee if Daniel Jones plays this year, you'll see more games like the Seattle Seahawks won last year. He got picked off by a rookie and took it to the house. Shaking my head. That was a bad decision, seeing some pressure that was coming but wasn't actually there. DeIlla giving me some credit on a point. Let's see. What else we got here? OG says, where did Michael Pratt go? He went to the Packers, so they got a developmental quarterback there. Big Dog says, so if this season looks like last season, does Shane get to draft his own QB, or should he be relieved of duty? If it looks like this past year, if it's as bad as this past year, I think they turn it all over. But if it's reasonable in some respects, but the coach is still having problems, then it would just be the coach. But if it goes bad like it did this past year, I think it's a full turnover. Mike says, I think you and Dan are wrong. Can you honestly say that this roster is top 7 in the NFC? A new coach GM usually don't play and win a football game year one that screwed everything up. No, the year one, Mike, is not the year they expedited things. Year 2 is the year they did. So you're right. It's not easy to win with the roster they had in year one, but it was an easy schedule. They made some good game plans with Daboll on offense and Martindale on defense, and they found their way, right? But there were holes. They were leaking at the end. They went 3-6-1 in their last 10. And at the moment, they're only 10-18-1 in their last 29 following the 6-1 start in 2022. Mike, what Dan was referring to in that story and what I've been talking about in relation to patience and when I said the team thought they were going to win the Super Bowl and all that, coming out of 2022, going into last year, 2023, there was big talk internally from the Giants about what they felt like they could be. And they were misevaluating where they were as a roster and as a team. So to your point, no, they're not a great roster, right? But they viewed themselves as being a roster that was capable of that and was at that level. And they added certain pieces to their team in order to take that, what they felt like could be the potential final jump. So that was a huge misevaluation on their part, and why it's hard to say now, hey, let's preach patience. This was never going to be fast, when you just admitted in a press conference last fall that you expedited the process thinking that you could get something done. Not one O lineman malpractice, says Miz. I agree. Hirsch getting some love. Big Dog says, I ain't going to lie. I wish we could have kept Tyrod because I know he would find neighbors. Great call, Big Dog. Yeah, so that's Drew Lock's time now. That's a great point. Miz says, we don't got nasty. We got nice guys. That's the thing, man. We need more nasty. The Giants need more nasty. Right. No goons on the line. That's right. I think Darian Beavers is that type of player if he could just stay on the field, says DeIlla. Shane Lemieux was nasty, but he hasn't been on the field, hasn't played well. Got to be nasty, have talent too. Lemieux not on the roster anymore. I'll make a friendly $5 bet that we'll be talking about the draft by week 8, says OG. Tariq says strategy should change according to the battlefield. The Giants are not the Bills. Exactly. BB was the one pick I would change, says Bookend Tackles. Why did Neighbors look so unhappy when he met with Daboll and Shane, says Michael. Michael, thanks for asking that. So I was actually standing there not far away when Neighbors arrived at the Giants facility. So that video that's circulating with everyone claiming that Neighbors wasn't excited to see Joe Shane and Brian Daboll and be a Giant. To me, when I was standing there live before the video came out, went viral and all that, when I was standing there, I saw him turn the corner. He was changing his shoes, I think, when he got out of the car. And then he looked exhausted to me. Like Neighbors looked really tired. And I'm sure, you celebrate with your family and friends in Detroit. You take that early flight to New Jersey, right? You get in, you have to roll right in, and you have to be on your A game. My takeaway in the live moment was, oh man, this kid's exhausted. You know what I mean? So when I saw those videos come out, listen, no one's in anybody's head, but I thought that misrepresented what happened there. I thought he was just tired. Tariq says, what is up with all this Joe Schoen worship? Shatter those rose-colored glasses. What is it about McCarthy you think they didn't like, says Brooklyn. Not positive, Brooklyn. Maybe they felt like I did about just the concept of, like, some people felt, well, McCarthy can do a lot of these things he didn't put on tape in college. It's just Michigan didn't ask him to because they didn't need him to. But then there's the school of thought that, and I don't necessarily disagree with this theoretically, is like, well, if a guy was elite as a quarterback in college, he probably would have been asked to throw the ball downfield for big touchdowns and put all those things on tape, right? So maybe that's how they felt exactly. I don't know exactly why they didn't feel like he was worth it. I do think it's interesting that while they didn't adjudge that he and Penix Jr. and Nix were worth those picks, that there were teams that all viewed them as top 12 guys. Tariq says, Giants are a lottery team. They're not making the playoffs unless Jesus plays. Book it. But maybe Neighbors is the savior. OG says, between AFC North and NFC East, how many games do you see the Giants winning? Between those two? Geez. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. 2? Ryan says, yeah, I don't want Dak at all. Dilla says, any info on Slayton contract, and is it going to be possible for this team to give him a new deal? I know there's some underlying cap issues that haven't been talked about. I think it would be possible to give him more money and to move money around, and definitely you can move money into the future. Like, you can always create space and kick money down the road, Dilla. So there's a way for them to do it. I'm just skeptical that they would do that. So I wonder whether this results in a trade instead. John B says, Pat is the man. RIP Corey Cunningham. Yeah, sad time. Tariq thinks they'll win 4, 5, maybe 6 games. Simeon says Drew Lock can also serve up some nice picks or interceptions. Yes, he will take chances down the field. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. Sean says, I'm way more worried about the starting offensive guard spot than quarterback right now. Upgrades, it looks like, with John Runyon Jr. and Aaron Stinney, but you're right. We still have to see it happen. And then John Michael Schmitz needs to take a step as well. Big Dog wants a quarterback respected in the league. Brooklyn says May 24th is the schedule release. It's that late? Really? May 24th? That feels really late. Big Dog says AFC North is going to be hell. Luann, what's going on? Welcome. She says Giants will make the playoffs. Luann is our eternal optimist. We love Luann on the channel. Luann's a long, loyal supporter here. Thank you so much, Luann. OG says, yeah, right. Luann says DJ will beat Dallas and the Eagles. Giants will win the division. Tariq says they will be in the lottery, Shedeur Sanders. D-Kid says, lest there be any lingering doubt, this is Shane's team. Gettleman references are no longer relevant. Absolutely, D-Kid. Simeon says, and yet David is listening. Miz says that David, who was trolling me earlier, is a clown. OG says that he's an ass. And Autumn says that she loves Giants football and presumably this chat. Thank you, Autumn. Illa says, can we have a redo on the hiring of Joe Schoen over Adam Peters, please? Yeah, we will see. That was Ryan Poles, Joe Schoen, and Adam Peters. Justin says, thank you for all the great work you do, Pat. Justin, thanks for being here and thanks for saying that. LGR, I hope that's Let's Go Rangers. FYI, by the way, I can't believe I did not bet on the Rangers to sweep the Capitals. Because, now listen, there's a lot of things in the world I don't know, okay? I know hockey. covered the Rangers. Like, I know hockey. And I watched 10 minutes of game one, Giants, Rangers, or I'm sorry. I watched 10 minutes of game one, Rangers, Capitals. And I looked right at my son and I said, the Rangers are going to sweep them. like that. Like, I was like, this is, and I didn't place a bet. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm watching them sweep the Capitals last night. I'm an idiot. I should have given that pick out on the show. Mike says, great show, Pat. Appreciate the information. Thank you, Mike. Thank you so much. OG says, Pat, you shouldn't be nice to people like him because they'll keep doing it. Yeah, OG, it's tough, though. Like, when, in my position, sometimes you really don't win if you're an ass back. You know what I mean? Like, if you're, it's just taking the high road is usually the smart way to go. It's not always easy to do, though. Hirsch says, David, take your bottom lip, pull it over your head, and swallow. Authentic says, facts, internet bums. What about everyone wanting JJ McCarthy? We're not going to discuss, says Dad Hat Daddy. No, yeah, I mean, listen, let's talk about it right now. Dad Hat, thanks for bringing it up. McCarthy and Michael Penix Jr. at 6. I mean, both would have upgraded your QB room from a developmental standpoint. Penix arguably would have been the best thrower of the football the second that he came into the building. I think he would have been. McCarthy would profile more as like the developmental. Here's the thing. If you're Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen, how do you not bring in a guy to help you reset the clock? Like, how do you not do that? Like, that helps you. That helps you from a job security standpoint, does it not? You would think. I mean, you don't just take a guy to take a guy if you don't think he can play, but obviously a lot of other people would think they could play. Oh, D Kit, I missed your super sticker there. Thank you. He says, David, don't forget to hit the like button. You guys have my back. I appreciate you. Dilla says, honestly, that's all I'm asking for at this point. Just put someone in there that will take shots down the field, give his wide receivers a chance. Dilla says, I just made a video the other day uttering those same exact words. Glad we see eye to eye, Pat. Tariq thinks it's unfair to compare the Eagles draft to the Giants. But Tariq, I think that was somebody making the comment that the Eagles had drafted corners combating the Giants selecting a stud wide receiver. I think that was what we were talking about there. Hirsch says even the Patriots take a late round flyer on Joe Milton. Yeah, which is actually curious, but yeah, that was what he was in this draft. OG hopes it's Drew Lock. They both got drafted the same year. Jones got drafted 6. Lock got drafted in the 2nd. Let that sink in. Michael Knight and D Kit should hit the eject button on David. That's right, Brett. Facts, Michael. That's right. Marvin Harrison Jr. was ranked higher according to Art Stapleton. This is Brooklyn. No, Brooklyn. It's according to Joe Schoen being asked. So Art asked Joe, was Neighbors your number one on your board when you took him? And Joe was Neighbors your number one receiver on your whole board? And Shane's answer essentially was no. He was the number one when we picked. So that's how it went. So we were all sitting there when Joe Schoen admitted that Marvin Harrison Jr. was their number one wide receiver. Stoudemire says, let's be honest, how many late risers within any draft class actually panned out to be great players? Odds are any QBs outside Caleb, Jaden, and May were originally ranked a lot lower. Yeah, that's a reason. That's a fair point, Stoudemire. LGR says, Pat, help us at Giants Brazil. We don't live in America to be able to access the daily news again. It's blocked for our country. Oh, that's right. Yeah. It's so stupid. The Daily News website gets blocked internationally like that. It makes absolutely no sense, LGR. I'm sorry about that. I know I say that. I tell them all the time. LGR, I'll tell you what. On the YouTube channel, shoot me a note. And sorry, I'm about to sneeze here. I'm trying to catch it. Shoot me a note on the YouTube channel, though, and tell me what types of things you're interested in seeing and reading and having access to specifically. Like maybe there's a certain topic that you're curious about. You could also shoot me an email if you want, pleonard@nydailynews.com. You can email me there. And then I'll try to get like some tidbits to you and try to kind of bring to you what you are missing and don't have access to. Yeah, zero line in an offensive line draft. It's tough. LeVar likes the UDFA QB the Giants picked up from Wabash. Yeah, I haven't. I wasn't going to talk about the undrafted guys in this draft and in this chat because I don't have my hand fully around everything confirmed, and I want to get to know the players a little bit more before I do. But I did ask Daboll about whether he was going to add another quarterback, and it sounded like they were only just going to order. They were adding guys for competition's sake, like in rookie mini camp, but it didn't sound like any meaningful roster addition. MJ checks in with another $5. MJ, thank you. MJ says, David, if Pat is so bad, why are you wasting your Monday night? And by the way, you directly led me to pay Pat more money. So really, you just supported him. Dave, MJ, my guy. Yeah, get these trolls out of here, man. Only constructive conversation. We don't have to agree, but it's got to be respectful, right? That's really the only rule. MJ, thank you so much, man. Thank you so much for having my back for another super chat. I really appreciate you. All right, let's keep going in the queue. We are rolling here. We are past 2 hours. I want to get to everybody's question and comment, though, because I really do value everything you guys bring here. Really appreciate it. Let's see. Big Dog says, Dak is light years better than Daniel Jones. Joe Marr agrees as well. Stoudemire says, glad the Giants didn't force a pick for a quarterback like McCarthy or Bo Nix or feel pressured by the fan base or by the media. Deilla says, yeah, Dak is definitely a better thrower of the football than Jones. I don't know how anyone could say any different. Big Dog says, we don't want Jones to fail, but he's failing. Let's be real. OJ says, I don't want Daniel to fail in life, but he has failed as a quarterback. Tariq doesn't like Daniel, but he hopes he proves him wrong. LGR says, do you think Daboll and Schoen managed to sell the owners that they went after a QB, but that it didn't work out? And with that, they gained one more year to try again to go after their QB. I viewed the draft as we tried to get our QB, we didn't. So now we're trying to fill holes because this year needs to look a lot better or else. Simeon says, is it true that CBS let Phil and Boomer go today? Yes, it is, unfortunately. But Phil is the man. Please go subscribe to and listen to the Sims Complete podcast with the Believe Network. They have a YouTube channel, and you can listen on Apple and Spotify as well, just like you can with the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast, which, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to have Gary Meyers on to talk Giants draft and Giants outlook, the quarterbacks, the team, the lay of the land, what's to come. Deilla says, Pats took Milton and will eventually end up with Bailey Zappi. How many slot corners and receivers do we need? Coaches need to lay off the slot next year, says Brett. Fair point, Brett. That's right. Quality, not quantity. Tariq says, I guess I'm the lone wolf after the third round. The Giants draft was trash. No, Tariq, I wasn't a fan of the draft outside of Neighbors. How do people expect Daniel Jones to be all-world coming off an injury like this? Yeah, no, it's hard. He's got to, he needs his legs to play his game. Exactly, OG. Shane should have cleaned house day one, says Big Dog. Deilla says, I'm not going to lie. I was probably against that a few years back, but that was the way to go. Jim says, more constructive after the fact analysis from Big Dog. Jim says, Pat, how do you know that Schoen and Daboll didn't have Mara's approval to try for May, and if he missed, not to draft a QB? How do you know that Schoen and Daboll didn't have Mara's approval to try for May, and if he missed, not to draft a QB? Jim, I've talked to people about this. Like, from what I understand, John Mara is not the kind of person who sits in the meeting and says, you're only allowed to try to take this one guy. After that, you're not allowed to take a quarterback. Like, that's not how John talks and leads. He could intimate in conversations that he doesn't think it's wise necessarily to just take a reckless swing at the position when we've invested so much money, let's say, in the quarterback position and in Daniel already, and we do all believe in him, right? So why would, right? So I think it would have been more subtle than like just saying you have permission for this and not that, right? Like that's how people I've talked to view John Mara. It's not like he would do something like that. But you could feel some of that indirect pressure as a GM and coach, or get like the gist of it if you were Schoen and Daboll of what Mara was asking you for and what he did and didn't want. So that's possible. Drew Lock has a big arm. I hope Brian Daboll can get the best of him, says OG. Mike says, worst thing for Schoen and Daboll was winning year one. That screwed up everything. Disaster year. I think it's an overstatement. How many games are you winning with your starting QB on IR and left tackle? Is there any truth to the Kareem Hunt rumor, says Val? Haven't heard that they're going to sign Kareem Hunt, but their running back room does lack some power. So I do think a power back would have even made sense in the draft, given what they have in their backfield. So still possible they add a player like that. Brooklyn says, what is it about McCarthy you think they didn't like? We already talked about that. Big Dog says, I think they can squeeze out 6 wins. I'm expecting another pick in the top 10. Yeah, that's fair. Brett says, round 1 and 4, A+, round 2, B-, round 3, D, round 5, B, and round 6, C-. Brett bringing the draft grades. Michael says, hey, Pat, I can't stand the notion that DJ is the most inept QB in the NFL. He's a fringe top 15 guy, in my opinion. Is the long-term answer? Probably not, but 2022 showed you he has ability. Give him some help. And that's what they're doing now. And that's a fair takeaway, Michael. Fair for you to feel that way, even if there are others who feel otherwise. Daniel certainly has provided enough production in certain moments to justify having people who feel like give him some better protection and better weapons. But the clock is ticking. If not, the sand has already run out on the hourglass, because the Giants themselves, that's what I always come back to here, Michael, is the Giants themselves, their leadership right now wanted a new quarterback here. Now, of course, they didn't decide to just take anyone, but they were hunting one. Simeon says, Falcons are too weak on defense to not get a top-tier edge rush at 8. Yeah, exactly. As somebody said earlier, it's not Madden. OG says, since 2011, it's hard to be optimistic about the Giants, but we're still here complaining like true fans. We all just want to see this team win, but most of us know Daniel Jones isn't that guy. Big Dog says, Kirk needs to relax. He's gotten paid every team he's been on. Right. No one's crying for him. Yeah. Jim says, Pat, some analysts say the Eagles had the best draft in the NFL. Can they beat Dallas and win the division? They can. They should. I think they will. Jim, part of the reason that people are saying they had the best draft is because they got good players. They got arguably the top 2 corners in the draft, or 2 of the top 5 corners in the draft, whatever it is. Also, they didn't have to trade up to get Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo, the best corner in the draft, which is a need they had. And then they made these calculated trades back for extra picks. I think it was 1 in the 3rd, 1 in the 4th, and 1 in the 5th next year, in a draft that people are excited about the draft's depth. Because I was just listening to some podcasts today, like there are NIL kids who are coming out next year. They didn't come out this year because they're making money in college right now, and they don't have to come out super early to get paid. So that's something to think about when you're evaluating the Eagles draft. They also picked up a lot of assets for next year. The Giants, of course, did not make trades back to get extra assets. They were making picks at their picks. And the only trade they efforted was a trade up. They did not take the trade offer from the Cardinals to go to 15. Robert says, they said Phil Simms was a bust the first few years. He spent it on his back. That's right. Dilla says, Cousins basically just left the same situation he had in Minnesota. Damn good receiver, strong tight end, great running back, which he hadn't cooked for a while. No defense will bring much of the same results he had in Mini. Excellent point, Dilla. It's kind of tough for the Giants, says Jose. You want to win games and compete, but then you don't want to be drafting in the 20s knowing you're trying to get a QB next year. That's right. That's right. But if you're winning games this year with Daniel Jones as your quarterback and you're in the 20s in the picks next year, then you're not looking for a quarterback. You have him under contract and it's Daniel Jones. Robert, let's see. Okay. MJ says, I'm ready for a new – oh, yeah, right. I saw that earlier. Got that. Brett says, Kirk, don't like that. Like it. Simeon says, Sims was never afraid to throw the ball down the field and was tough as nails. Jose says I would give up 3 firsts for Josh Allen. Trust me, Brian Daboll would too. He absolutely loves Josh Allen. They won a lot of those games off the back of Saquon Barkley in 2022. I don't know, man. It says Big Dog. Big Dog's right. They keep bringing up those average stats in 2022, 15 touchdowns in the air, big deal. Barkley won most of the earlier games. The defense did too. That was the quiet part. Do you think Hyatt beats out Slayton to start this year and they run Neighbors, Hyatt, Robinson in 11 personnel? There's a chance Slayton gets traded and it makes that decision for them. Slayton it's dangerous to have like a ton of inexperience on the field. And Slayton and Daniel Jones have really good chemistry too. So I wouldn't just jump at something like that. Then again, if Hyatt can't beat out Darius Slayton, that would also be a concern, right? DeIlla says he only threw 13 or 14 passes down the field that year. Should have had a high completion percentage on deep throws. Kevin says, just joined. Did I miss any conversations about the young running backs we added? Tracy and Turbo both have some people who speak highly. Yeah, Turbo, the undrafted rookie, and then Tracy. I know Tracy's a guy who could be, he could be dangerous with the ball in his hands. I think I'm looking at him as more of a kick returner even and a receiving threat as a running back, talking to people, than just don't think of him as a standard running back. Neither of these guys are like Saquon Barkley replacements. Turbo, not a lot of production in college. So anything that you see there is a projection. Wouldn't surprise me if they add somebody else if they can at a cheap rate. We got another super chat from D Kit, my man, coming back in saying, I think Joe Schoen and everybody tried to get May because they saw him as a special talent, not that they lost faith in Jones. That's why they drafted Neighbors instead of trading back and acquiring more talent. I personally believe, based on my information, that they saw this as a chance to lay the groundwork. And that's how I was always describing it to you guys, right? Laying the groundwork to move on from Daniel Jones. And I've stressed this a lot. The Giants view the Green Bay Packers model as an ideal way to go. So they would have loved to be in a position here where they move to, hey, we still have Daniel under contract. We're paying him all this money. Let's get Drew Lock in case we need, but let's get a young quarterback in here where he can either take over or he can develop. We work him in, we groom him. If Daniel plays, great. If Daniel doesn't, and we can develop this kid, great. But we have some insurance. We have a long-term plan. We have a short-term plan, right? So that's kind of where all that thinking was going. But D-Kit, thank you for bringing that back to that point and to that conversation. And certainly now they need to maximize what they have, and getting a player like Neighbors could be the best way to do that. Let's see. Big Dash is not surprised the Giants drafted 0 O-linemen because they signed 6 in the offseason. I'm still surprised though, Big Dash, because it is a good depth in this offensive line draft. Talking to some experts I agree with and trust their opinion, they felt like getting some young talent to develop and mold was important, and also that the swing tackle position for the Giants is not solved or set with the tackles they have on their roster. Let's see. Yeah, Brett points out that Jack Rabbit couldn't keep his mouth shut and got him cut. Were there other reasons he got cut? Well, he quit on the field in some of those games. If you remember, he was basically like not even trying to tackle guys. So he just kind of went off the deep end in a couple ways. Guards killing Jones, but he was working with all wide receiver threes or practice squad dudes, says MJ. OG continuing to make his point that Daniel Jones isn't the guy. Big Dog says, I'm confused why these players get drafted and they don't develop well under the Giants. Those are the questions that you have to be asking, Big Dog, for sure. It's a failure of the operation when that doesn't happen. Bro, who is he going to throw to? Or who is he throwing to, says MJ. Jack says the Patriots weren't going to trade down. Ultimately, that's where it went, and that's where it ended up. Brett says, Jones said one more round. I didn't hear no bell. Let's see. Big Dash says, Pat, do you think Daniel Jones will be ready by training camp? I don't think so. I don't think you can count on that, Big Dash. I don't think it's fair to Daniel to just expect that. And even if he's on the field in training camp, we know we're not going to be looking at the full version of Daniel Jones that early, right? He might be on the field and throwing, but as far as live reps and practicing and live bullets and all that, I think that's hard to expect. You know what I mean? If Locke starts the season and is playing well, do you pull him for Daniel Jones? No, I don't think that's fair. No, I don't. Big Dash, I think that would be crazy. But personally, I don't know what you guys think. Daniel Jones, OG going strong tonight. Authentic says, for the injury clause, he has to be able to pass his physical by the start of the following year. I can't remember the date. Sometime before the draft, I thought. Yeah, Authentic, I don't know the exact date either. Thanks for saying that. So the injury clause, right. So, right, if he gets hurt this year, misses time, doesn't kick in the injury clause. It has to do with going into next year. I would think Authentic, well, the start of the league year is March 15th next year, I believe, right around there. But then there's the start of the spring program as well, right, in mid-April. So Authentic, it could be end up being the physical in mid-April. You know what? That's another question I need to get to the bottom of. I'll bring that to you guys next chat. Justin says, if you are holding your breath for Drew Lock to save us, there is no hope. Let's see. DeIlla says, I'm not going to lie. I'm not a big on Drew Lock, but I do think he would definitely make the season more entertaining. I agree with that. This offense is stale, like watching paint dry. We do want to be entertained at the end of the day, right? Guys, be nice. OG has a strong viewpoint on one side. He's just saying that he feels like they need a new quarterback. That's all. He's all right to think that. Let's see. Jack thinks Belichick has lost it badly. We'll see. Excuse me. Thanks for being here, guys. We're past 2.5 hours now on the Talkin Ball live with Pat Leonard. We are live Mondays and Thursdays, 9 p.m. Eastern. You can follow me on PL on NFL, on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Threads, P Leonard NYDN on X, and on the New York Daily News website, nydailynews.com/sports. And of course, on the Believe Network here on the Talkin Ball with Pat Leonard podcast and the 2 lives we do every week at minimum. A lot more to come on the channel. If you haven't subscribed already, if you haven't turned on your notifications for the lives to come, please do. And please hit the like button, those thumbs up while you are here. That live like helps us continue to drive engagement. YouTube's algorithm gets to work and tells all the Giants fans who don't know about what we're doing here what we are doing. But if you're not aware already, I am the New York Daily News NFL columnist and Giants beat writer. And so what's unique about what we're doing here, what I'm doing here, is that I am on the Giants beat in the building every day, covering the team, relationships in the locker room, in the front office, the coaching staff. And with those relationships and then around the league as well, there's just not a lot. There's not a lot of people doing what we're doing, which is to try to bring you the information directly. We're streamlining it straight from the locker room to you, straight from the sideline to you, straight from my phone to you. And I hope that this inside info and this insight into the way that the league is working, the Giants are working, is helpful. I'm thrilled that it's getting the reception it is from you guys. And I thank you for all of your support. You can purchase a super chat, super sticker to elevate your comment or question to the top of the thread. Tonight, fans have been rolling in with super chats and super stickers. But like I said, don't feel obligated to. If you don't, just hit the like button or just sit here and watch and enjoy the show. Try to get through the rest of these questions. Let's see. Have to hope that Jalen Hyatt takes the next step and Evan Neal, 2 big players that you need to take next steps. That's right. Justin feels like people are overrating Drew Lock. AJ says, have to hope. Right. Yep. We heard that. MG says, OG is now comparing Brady to Jones. You just hop around. We were talking about most guys have QBs. We had practice squad guys. Brady also had a top 5 defense. Yeah, no, I think OG is just stressing that he feels like Daniel Jones is not an elite quarterback, that he has a ceiling. MJ says, I don't think Daniel Jones is the guy, but you need to engage with facts. All right. Let's see. Pat, do you have any insight into why the Giants did not draft Rattler, even though they brought him in on a top 30? If not Rattler, why not Pratt? In the end, I would imagine that the lack of height is a concern. Also, just players who, in their opinion, at that point in the draft, they're looking at that point to get guys who can contribute at other positions and not develop and not play when their ceilings are much lower. Like if they're going for a franchise quarterback who they feel like has high-level traits and can turn into a star, that's different from spending a draft asset on a quarterback who's not playing and also has a lower ceiling, is my read on that. I don't know the exact details of like, why not Rattler? Why not Pratt? Why not this guy? But ultimately, they clearly, I think as a strategy, decided that it was more productive for them and more urgent for them to address needs on their roster once they didn't make the May pick. And it was about kind of plugging holes to try to be better this year. Justin feels like no quarterback would have been successful the last 5 years in this situation. Big Dash says, Pat, are you drinking an old fashioned? I was. I finished it. I need a refill, but I can't leave. SF says, everyone keeps saying no line in the draft. We got 5 of them in free agency, and it's not over yet. If Waller retires, it could free up $6 million or more in cap space. We could always sign more. Yeah, I mean, the top offensive linemen aren't out there anymore, though. And also, I do like the idea of giving Carmen Brasillo some young guys to work with. But let's see. If Coach Daboll slipped in a comment, would it say, you guys are pissing me off, or I believe in the players we have, or we should have taken a lineman early? I think if Daboll had truth serum and he could say something, he would say, my offense could produce at a higher level with better quarterback play. That's what I think he would say. MG says, all right. I'm going to ignore the argument ongoing in the comments over the quarterbacks. I understand, though, you guys are very passionate about it, and I appreciate it, and you can continue to use the chats for that, but I'm going to skip over that as far as like what I'm addressing in the chat. Super Unknown says, I love the Giants, but man, the draft was as bittersweet as the Daniel Jones draft. Oh, I see. You're talking about the Jets. They have Aaron Rodgers and Tyrod, and they drafted Travis. You love the Jets, but man, the draft was bittersweet. Okay. Jack says about the Penix pick, you can't overdraft, especially at QB. Mike G says, Pat, if I'm the Giants, I'm not risking $23 million guaranteed in 2025 by playing Daniel Jones this year with his neck injury. Lock can't be much of a drop-off. Big Dog says, Neighbors isn't saving Jones. Come on, Pat. Big Dash says, I've accepted the fact that it would take another failed season for some folks to move on from Jones. The sad thing is another failed season can get the coach canned. Correct, Big Dash. Jack says, can't blame Jones completely. A lot of other quarterback success is related to talent around him. Big Dash says, no way the schedule comes out that late. Yeah, somebody told me it was like May 10th, that's what somebody told me in the other day, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure it's early May. Jack loves Luann's optimism. OG says, you all love Daniel Jones, as y'all know him personally. Okay. Yeah, it's okay. Dilla says, we're going to hit the home stretch here, guys, and then we're going to get out of here. Thank you so much. We're pushing 3 hours here, and this chat's been fantastic. Deilla says, we're always going to fall victim to the GM head coach expediting the process. It almost becomes a selfish act on their part because of the fear of losing a job. Future is basically thrown out the window. Deilla, I think that is an ownership problem too. I think John Mara and Steve Tisch, I think Giants ownership always sees a little bit of progress and they have trouble not going all in the next year. And I think they walk themselves right into that same trap. Big Dog says Ryan Poles is running laps around our GM. Jack says it's a long brutal process rebuilding a team. Crunch Bunch says, what do you think of the Nuen and Phillips picks? I love Tyler Nuen, the safety, ball hawk and leader. Phillips sounds like he's talented but needs some work. Heard Saban loved both picks, so that's a plus. I think both players could help them in the long term. I think Nuen, I think they both track as potential special teams contributors early as rookies. Nuen looks like the guy they're drafting to play and start on defense with Jason Pinnock, or at least have a leading edge to compete for that starting role. You have Jalen Mills, you have Dane Belton, but I don't think you're targeting safety and maybe a slight overreach in some people's opinions on that player, unless you're eyeing that as like, we view this guy as the guy who's going to play there because we don't think Belton's ultimately going to be that guy. Like, that is my and some other people's reads on what that looks like. And I do like Nuen as a guy. I do like what he could be as a leader. I like his qualities. I like the fact he takes the ball away. You need that. And also played a ton of games in college, like 55 games or something like that at Minnesota. I like that. Phillips, interesting. I feel like they could have gotten a better corner in round 2. Instead, they go safety, so they wait. Physical, he can tackle. But, you want a guy who is definitely going to be, he said he's sticky in coverage, but you want a guy who's going to be able to lock down in coverage. Ultimately, it's obviously hard to find a corner who both tackles well and is sticky in coverage. A good example would be like Darnay Holmes, a friend of the show, a guy I like a lot, has struggled in coverage, tackles well though, right? And has made plays on the ball when given opportunities, but in coverage has struggled, right? So sometimes there's guys like actually Nick McLeod on the outside, a guy who's now challenging for an outside corner spot with the Giants, and very good dude, and I'm rooting hard for. He's a guy who was good in coverage, is good in coverage, and was really good in coverage last year when given some extended opportunities. But on the outside against the run isn't always the best in run support, right? So different people have different skill sets. So you're looking for people who can do both capably, right? Even Deonte Banks, the first round pick, they were trying to get to, tackle better in run support last year. A guy who is physically built and gifted and hard-nosed. All right. Big Dash says Ryan Poles is more lucky, a bunch of horrible signings, but he makes that trade with the Panthers. All right. Let's see what else is coming down the pike here. Let's see if there's any other questions. D-Kid says, Pat, I find that I really have very little idea what our defensive scheme will look like this year. I've looked at Tennessee, but I can't get my head around what we are likely to see. Generally, D-Kit, you're going to see more of a 4-3 with more zone. There will be man, but there will be more zone than what we're used to seeing. And the way that it was described, I think Schoen described it, like he said, that Martindale would set up teams for a big exotic blitz on third down, whereas Bowen will be a guy who relies more on the rush. And then what you're going to see, and Wink did this a lot too, but you're going to see, I think with Bowen, sometimes he's going to line up a certain way and he's going to have, basically like dummy blitzes, right? Like somebody on the edge, and then they're going to drop into coverage, and then here comes the slot, right? And that's stuff that Wink did too. But I think he's going to do a lot of that type of stuff, trying to mix and match and create some confusion for the offensive line in front of the QB. But I do think in general, it is fair to say this will not be as exotic of a defense or as aggressive of a scheme from the standpoint of not always throwing, the kitchen sink at the quarterback. We will see. This is why the defensive line being built up was so critical and important, is because what they ultimately, I believe, are intending to rely more on is a 4-man pass rush. And, the stopping the run element that somebody mentioned earlier, D-Kit, is one to remember. It's one that the Giants have not been able to do and one they really need to focus on. And so they really are trying to get better at that element and be just more sound and fundamental in their run defense. I personally think I'm not sure if they're going to have as the same kind of scheme advantage. That's what I would say. But we'll see. It'll be on Shane Bowen. D-Kid says, what, you said Phil Simms is the man. Boomer isn't the man too? No, I don't know. Jack says, no love for Boomer. Oh, no, I don't personally know Boomer like I know Phil. That's all. I know Boomer's a good analyst as well, for sure. I loved what he brought as well. That was just me giving some love to Phil Simms because I know him personally and I love his insight, but I also know him very well and he's a very good guy. But yeah, no, I mean, Boomer being out stinks too, for sure. Killa says, so that pick of Arch Manning at Newman High with the Giants hand warmer a few years back had the fan base riled up. Now DJ officially the bridge to Arch. Let's go. OG is optimistic about the defense. Big Dog says if they had traded Barkley and McKinney last season, we might have had the trade package for Drake May. Ooh, don't say that too loud. And if they traded Barkley instead of trying to win more games down the stretch, then they probably would have lost the games they needed to in order to have the high enough pick to not even have to trade up. Justin says, real fans cheer for the Giants no matter what. This is what separates frauds from real fans. Though, Justin, I will say this. I do think, different people have different ideas of loyalty. And I know it sounds like OG is catching some heat for being as critical as he has in this chat. And listen, OG, first of all, thanks for being supportive. And thank you, everybody, for engaging and having the varying viewpoints. But here's what I would say. When I've been a fan of teams, I do think loyalty sometimes is standing behind your team through thick and thin. But sometimes, in my opinion, loyalty is calling your team out for making a bad decision or you're fed up with this. And like booing your team when you see the product in the stadium, that's not acceptable, right? Is that supporting your team? Some people would say, oh, don't boo your team. But no, booing your team is telling them this is not acceptable. We want better because we care. So that's all I would say is remember that the boos and the criticisms are always coming from a constructive place of wanting it to look better than it does. I know that icon anywhere on that super chat. That's the man, Tuto in the house. Tuto says massive salutes and respects to Big Boss Pat and all diehard Giants fans across the pond. Greetings from our entire rugby club, currently training in the UK. Greetings to you, Tuto. We saw a couple rugby mates go off the board, Tuto, right? Didn't we see a couple late round rugby mates go off the board there in the 5th, 6th, etc.? All right, let's see. Let me get back into the queue here. If Philly stays healthy, the East is there, says Simeon. Dilla says Eagles just had to put together that secondary and they were good to go. They always draft well, says Jack. Yeah, I personally think Howie Roseman is one of the better GMs. Truthfully, May wasn't worth 3 firsts, says Big Dash. Stevie says, hey, Pat, honestly believe that Joe Shea and Brian Daboll wouldn't have signed Jones if they knew QB Will Levis would fall like he did in the 23 draft. Interesting. May has a lot of bad tape, but he had some amazing tape as well. That's why he has to sit, says Jack. Right, developmental. Dilla says, yeah, super unknown. Falcons are basically the same team as the Vikings. It's crazy. That is funny. Let's see. Hate says, could you see the Giants signing Dak Prescott is a free agent after the season? That, I have talked to some people about that could be an option. That would be fascinating, right? Bringing Dak here after letting Saquon go to Philly, all this interdivision stuff. Ruben says, I recently saw a photo of Evan Neal, and it looks like he has lost a lot of weight. It does, Ruben. I agree. Hopefully he's healthy, ready to go, clear mind, feeling good physically. Michael says, why does it feel like the Eagles have the best luck in the draft and have the right players fall to them every year? Well, some of it's luck, and some of it's good preparation and smart evaluations. Brett says, thanks. Appreciate you, Brett. Stevie says, Dexter was developed well. Andrew was developed well. And McKinney was developed well. Dexter and Andrew are first-round picks. Andrew was a top 4 pick. Dexter was a top 15 pick, right? Or 17. McKinney was a high second-rounder. They're all 3 first-rounders. Stevie, not that the Giants don't deserve credit for having those players, but development is more like, a second rounder counts, I guess, but development is like 3rd, 4th, 5th, or a team that brings free agents from places where they haven't worked out and having them work out. That's that kind of stuff. Let's see. OG, my man, thanks for being here. Simeon, appreciate you. Deilla says, thanks for the time, Pat. Look forward to more. Thank you, Deilla. Thanks for being here. Killer Cam says, what if Locke looks good in the preseason? Not counting on it, but could be something. OG says, I don't take anything personally because I don't own the team. I'm just a fan. Super Unknown says, Pat, you are getting on these super chats. You are getting, I assume you mean rich on these super chats. Maybe you can buy the Giants. Yeah, you want me to be the new owner? That'd be fun. Dilla says, Rattler reminds me of Locke. On the list of current conference championship droughts, the Giants are 10th longest. Interesting, Mike. Giants second guessed themselves and paid the price for keeping Barkley. He loses too much yardage, says Nick's 100 a GM. Interesting. Brett M says, what if Bredesen and Feliciano end up all pro? Wait, listen, Feliciano, I like Ben Bredesen a lot. It's a big loss for the locker room. And Feliciano's he's such a nasty player in a good way. They really need that and miss that on their offensive line compared to what they had in 2022. Feliciano balling in San Francisco, says Mike. Nix says, all we needed to do was fix the line and get a running back who keeps the offense on schedule. A2Z Me says, this chat has really taken off. Good for you, Pat. You deserve the attention. A2Z Me, thank you so much. And we are not done. We're just getting started here, man. I can't wait to build this up to next season. It's going to be so fun. I'm so excited for it. Simeon says, Giants are bringing in 5 undrafted rookie linemen to compete. We'll see if they can get at least one good one. Yeah, now we'll break those down when we do another live chat when those things become official. Can the Giants get Tom Brady out of retirement? Hey, OG, not a bad idea. Worth asking, right? Killer Cam says Theo and Bellinger are the tight ends. Waller divorcing Kelsey Plum seems to be the nail. He's done right. Hopefully he is still okay. Killer Cam, I don't believe Waller is playing, but he hasn't made it official. Is trending that way, it seems. The Giants are preparing as if he's not going to. Theo, Bellinger, Manhurts, those guys. Let's see. Tuto says, much love and respects to one of the mentors and motivators in the building. Authentic, the Gold Nuggets and roadmaps genius, great wealth and health to Authentic. Tuto, you are an absolute real one, dude. Absolute real one. All right, let's see. I got to get back into the chat here real quick, and then we will wrap up shortly. Thank you guys all for being here throughout this. Stevie says it should be QB Will Levis, Saquon Barkley, Neighbors, and Hyatt. To be honest, I don't think Levis is going to be the answer in Tennessee either ultimately, though, Stevie. But that's interesting. Coaches will always play to win now and never the future, says Jack. Typically true. Yep. Big Dog says, how do you feel about Mawasa? I think it's Mawasa. Yeah, so that's the Giants' 6th-round pick from UCLA. I like him, type of guy who middle linebacker for the Bruins, leading tackler the last 2 years. Brings some attitude, the kind of attitude we were talking about the Giants need. I think he has some of that on-field nastiness about him as a playmaker, which is good. Obviously, he's not going to be the Giants' Mike. So, I think in his evaluation, you talk to people, it's about being out in space and coverage is not where you want him. So if he's an outside linebacker in a 4-3, does he get exposed in that regard, right? Could he help the run defense? That's, I think, what we're going to be looking for in training camp. He will absolutely be a special teamer, though, right off the bat. He and Michael Gabriel from the Giants special teams coordinator. Gabriel coached him as special teams coordinator at Hawaii before he transferred over to UCLA. So he will be a factor on special teams right away. Simeon says NFL schedule will likely be released May 9th. Yeah, that sounds about right. May 9th, 10th, right around there. Jack says this is a good chat. Jack, so happy to be here. Thank you so much. I really can't thank you enough. Saban says, Authentic says Saban had Nuen on his all-defensive team featuring players from the 2024 draft. He said Tyler Nuen is probably the best safety in the draft, and he was the first safety off the board. So, Nick Saban having his back, not a bad thing. Dilla says Johnson, we could have had Dalton Kincaid as well, not hating on the Banks pick. I'm just saying. Upside says, how do you feel about the direction Joe Schoen has gone with the team since joining? I think that Joe Schoen, when he got here, had the right idea, not an overnight fix. And I think ultimately when he and Brian Daboll took this job, they looked at it as give Daniel Jones one more chance, but they envisioned most likely drafting a quarterback last year. The problem is, as somebody said earlier, that winning that first season changed everything about how they were operating. And, so I think when he came in, he had the right idea. But even like his first comment in his introductory press conference was about, like, I don't believe in tearing it down and rebuilding. Like, I think you can compete now while building for tomorrow. And, to the point you guys were mentioning earlier about Duggan raising the idea of him saying, they expedited the process in the fall. Joe Schoen has been saying one thing and has a good idea of where the Giants were when he inherited it. But also, I don't think at this point, I think his drafts have not been as strong as maybe people realize, or I think maybe he gets more credit for his personnel additions than he deserves at times. I do also think, though, that he has a good process, and I do like his process about how he goes about things. Seems cleaner and more advanced than the way Gettleman was running things. But ultimately, the Giants, if you're talking about stud players they have on their team, more of them have been acquired by Dave Gettleman, really, than they were by Joe Schoen. Of course, now you have Brian Burns added with Bobby Okereke and Malik Neighbors. So hopefully that starts to turn, but it's year 3 already. So I think it looked like it was on the right track early on, but I thought it was smoke and mirrors a little bit. And anyone who truly understood what the Giants were coming out of that first playoff season and that blowout loss to the Eagles there in the playoffs had to understand that they were still pretty far away. And so I think that the misevaluation of where they were coming off of that season is on Schoen as well as on the whole organization, including ownership. And it's part of the reason why they're here. Ultimately, knowing that you're probably moving on from the QB, but then signing him to that contract, I will never understand how they went from trying to extend Saquon on a multi-year deal and tagging Daniel to signing Daniel to the multi-year deal of that size and tagging Barkley. It's insane. Timothy says, hey, Pat, should the Giants name Tommy DeVito their starting QB over Daniel Jones and Drew Lock? No, they should not, and no, they will not. Let's see. Deilla showing respect to the stream. And OG basically telling me to stop having his back because he doesn't care what people think. All right, you got it. Let's see. Did you hear that the Giants invited Evan Neal's cousin to minicamp, Chaz Neal? Yeah, I saw Evan post that on his story. That was interesting. Jack says, yes, an international guy was drafted. Timothy says, should the Giants switch their defense back to 4-3? I believe that's what it's looking like under Shane Bowen, Timothy, more of a 4-3 than a 3-4. Justin says, thank you for taking the time to do this chat, Pat. All of your info and writing is greatly appreciated and valued. Go Giants. Thank you, Justin. Thanks for being here. Jack says, former rugby player Travis Clayton was drafted by the Buffalo Bills. He was a 221st overall pick in the 7th round. All right. Interesting. A. West says, dang, Pat, get some sleep. I know. I'm getting there. We're pushing 3 hours here. We're almost done. Authentic says, had you on for the drive home. I got home, finished some work, and appreciate and you've been killing the stream. Appreciate the time in tonight's stream. Thank you, Authentic. Thanks for being here, man. Really appreciate all your support, as always. Let's see. Feliciano was kind of hidden by other good O-line play. He still has his issues. Yeah, no, he has his issues as a player. I just like his nasty attitude. OG says, online Big Blue, Authentic, The Beard, Talkin Ball with Pat, and a few others are the best Giants content creators for real. They always keep it real, no matter what the fans think. Will Muaso be the next Micah Parsons? No, he will not. He's a middle linebacker, not an edge, Timothy. Let's see. OG says, for all the people who hate me because of what I think about Daniel Jones, keep up the good work. It is much appreciated. The player haters ball. Bring on the haters. Tuto says, OG, you bet, mate. And also Dash as well. Please, everyone, subscribe to all these hardworking Giants content creators and enjoy the next 10 years of your lives, lads. Tuto, you're the man, heart and soul of the chat. The G-Men pick, what's best for the team, 2 starters, depth, and special teams players, says Mikey. Stevie says, it's just Will Levis reminds me of Josh Allen and what Brian Daboll did for Josh Allen. Now you're talking about Drake May a little bit. Deilla says, we need Muasa to turn into like a Jonathan Goff type player. Give a couple good seasons and I'll be happy. That's right. Tuto showing love by the chat. Let's see. What do we got here? I'm doing good, Tuto. Just been sitting at home nursing a shoulder surgery, says Deilla. I had 2 months ago. Bored, but it gives me a chance to do more content. Hope you are well. Best wishes. All right. Love to see it. Hope you get well, Deilla. Let's see. Hate says, do you see us signing Dak if we don't pick a high QB if he's available? That'd be interesting. Possibly could be available. He's one of the veterans. Kyler Murray could be available. What do we say? Guys are talking about Goff, Cousins, Geno Smith. I doubt Geno wants to come back to NY, but some of the names we were throwing out. D-Kit said, I'm going to need Talkin Ball stream during the season. Big Dog says, good stream, Pat. And Deilla says, I appreciate you, Pat. Appreciate you guys. I'll end on this. So we're sponsored by Bet Online. We're also sponsored by Estate 98 Coffee and Essentia Day Cafe from El Salvador. Dates back to 1798. D-Kit. So Talkin Ball does run during the season. We're going through the offseason, through training camp. And D-Kit, here's the deal. We do post-game live chats. I come out of the locker room, whether it's at MetLife Stadium or on the road when I'm traveling with the Giants. And I travel with the Giants everywhere. I come out of the locker room. I touch up my story with quotes and post some things on X if I need to put quotes out there. And then I jump on YouTube live with you guys. I started that this past season. And this Talkin Ball stream, it's going to be post-game, every Giants game, right after the game we go. And then we're going to have them going during the week in addition to guests on the pod. And I have more things in the works too, more offerings for content. So you're going to love it, and I'm going to love having you. And I appreciate you guys. We've gone 3 hours here. It doesn't feel like 3 hours to me. I love doing this, and I love doing it with you guys, and I love that you're getting something out of it. If you're listening on audio, thanks as well on Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your pods. Thanks for being here. Tuto, thanks for checking in and supporting the channel as always. And I want to give shout outs to MJ, Chris, Lewis, Dr. Garrett, D. Kit, Dope Des, Peter, Joey, Gerald. Who else do we have in here? Tuto, everyone who chipped in with all of those super chats and super stickers, but everyone who commented, everyone who participated. Simeon says, great show. Have a great night. Thank you all, everybody. Really appreciate you. Tuto, good luck to the boys out there. And I'll see you guys on Thursday night, 9 p.m. Eastern. We will be here again to talk Giants football, to talk NFL draft. But also, we're going to start spinning it forward here into the spring program. We'll talk a little bit more schedule. We'll talk about some specific players. I'll bring you more info and insight into what's going on with the team, maybe some other additions. Hopefully I can get some read on what's going on there, and really appreciate you guys. Authentic OG was a big-time commenter tonight. Really appreciate you. Justin says he can't wait for the season. Authentic says, good work. Get some rest, fam. Peace. See you later, guys. See you next time. Thank you so much.